Good evening. Should probably turn the music down very. Still, maybe I should bring it up a little more. I have it. Hello, Q. I went digging through my books to see what I wanted to read, and I came back with a small pile. I'm certainly not thinking of going through all of them, but it took me back a little bit looking through them. For instance, I picked up City of Saints and Madmen from my collection, and I thought, like, it's a book of short stories, this should be fine. And then I actually looked at the page count of it, and kind of a case of, maybe I misunderstood what they were calling short stories here. That's more like novellas. Because for the page count, it's the introduction for City of Saints and Madmen. I don't have a picture of this. Let me count the final page number. Let's see. Okay, that doesn't count. That's page 71 of the appendix. There's 233 pages before you begin about like a 70-something page appendix. And there's only 4 stories in here. Spread them out in... I feel like the page numbers don't quite match up. Although it's in... Oh, I think they restarted it. I think they restart the page numbers or something like that for each section of stories now that I look through this again. It's been a number of years since I read this, but I remember very much enjoying this book, A City of Saints and Madmen, the Jeff Vandermeer book. So I kind of have to put that aside. It doesn't qualify as a short story. It's been out for a number of years. Jeff Vandermeer, I think, is not... He's not an unpopular author, that's for sure. I received it as a book. It's not something I would have necessarily picked out myself, but in hindsight, it was a very good choice. Yeah, let me grab the blurb real quick. It feels weird to call him a bit of like a better modern Lovecraft without the racism, for one. So like in this book, this set of short stories is all about a place called Ambergris, a city of elegance and squalor, of religious fervor and wanton lusts, and everywhere, on the walls of courtyards and churches, an incandescent fungus of mysterious and ominous origin. In Ambergris, a would-be suitor discovers that a sunlit street can become a killing ground in the blink of an eye. An artist receives an invitation to a beheading and finds himself enchanted. And a patient in a mental institution is convinced he's made up a city called Ambergris, imagined its every last detail, and that he's really from a place called Chicago. It's fairly well detailed. I like it also as like a world building kind of book in a way. Thank you for the watering remove. I will take some water. And on that vein, I also have a stack of Lovecraft books. Well, collections. Call of Cthulhu and Other Weird Stories. The Thing on the Doorstep and Other Weird Stories, and The Dreams in the Witch House and Other Weird Stories. Ambergris? How was I pronouncing it? Was I pronouncing it a little strange? Ambergris. Ambergris, right? Ambergris? Ambergris. Again, a lot of what I'm reading, I may not have heard pronounced before, so I'm just going off of what it sort of feels like, except for, I guess, ambergris, which I'm saying, I guess, the lazy way. Because even thinking about it, there was that whole episode, Ambergris? Ah, okay. Hmm. I was just thinking more so there's that episode of Futurama where they go on about it for a little while. But I wanted to start with Yellow Wallpaper. That was the one I really, really wanted to reread. But I also have a book of science fiction here too. It's The Road to Science Fiction from Heinlein to Here. It's a bunch of really, really good short stories. And for once, they're actually kind of short. And also, the book is really crinkly sounding. Uh, the book has definitely seen better days. There's some. Oh, there's a chunk that's actually coming out. Let me check. Oh, wait. This doesn't belong. This must be a bookmark. Oh, this is a very old bookmark. Okay. What? What is it in here for? What is it even in? Okay. Hmm. This looks. Okay. This is a nonfiction section, it looks like. Yes, the origin and development of science fiction writers. That must have been where I left off. It's like page 492. So, what short stories did I skip? I skipped Sundance, and I skipped Science Fiction as Simile, and a section from The Left Hand of Darkness, and When It Changed. Okay. This one. Let's see. Why not literature? All You Zombies. Right. Who Can Replace a Man? What was it? The Cold Equations. Sail on, sail on. We Can Remember It For You Wholesale. I was thinking of a different story in here, but I guess it's not in here. Or maybe I just remember what the concept was and not the name of it, which does not quite match. That might be more so the issue. We'll find out. Normally, I don't read much science fiction, but I generally prefer fantasy. Uh, but short stories are easier to work through in that regard. And a lot of them are, I don't want to say light on the science fiction because they're definitely science fiction. I suppose it's more the. I'm not a fan of, I guess, determining the mechanics of something. I think that's more so my issue. But science fiction as a wrapper for something else is much more palatable to me. I hate to bring up anime, but those sort of, I guess, the question of like Gundam and Macross, right? Uh, Macross is a wrapper for culture and music questions, and Gundam is what the wrapper for politics. And also, just I suppose, I guess they're both for giant robot battles, but I feel like Gundam is much more heavy and much more focused on that. But I guess that's harder science fiction versus softer science fiction as well, that question. Because I do know that there's some sort of, for Gundam, a question of, I don't want to say they figure out the mechanics for it because some of it is obviously not possible yet, but the illustrations, I distinctly remember how colonies worked. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I suppose a lot of the science fiction mangaka who really, really like science fiction. I'm also thinking of Knights of Sidonia. Lots of details in there and lots of considerations for how things would actually work in space or while you're in a ship in space. For instance, in Sidonia, what happens when the gravity generators fail? But I suppose enough about. Well, actually, how are you doing? I haven't asked you. I was so busy talking about myself. And not even about myself, really, about what I was planning on doing today. I was also picking out other stories online as well. I found a few other books that I would like to read, but at the same time, they are not short stories, and the topics might be a bit boring to other people. I found a nice book on, I think it was typography. but typography as of at least 100 plus years ago. Typography is pretty neat. It's I haven't actually gotten to see an old-fashioned letterpress in motion, but I've heard of people who have, and I've heard of people who found them like locked away in a barn or something, and it kind of you need a huge piece of machinery to take that thing out. So it kind of lives in the barn until someone needs it. An entire, well, huge printing machines. I have gotten to work on like a more standard lithographic plate printer, and that was pretty neat. One color at a time. Put your hands in the wrong place and you're dead. Dying of anxiety. Oh, you have to work? It's not fair. Went to bed at 1, woke up at 9, went back to sleep, woke up at 2. Is that a bad thing? That doesn't sound... I guess like the accidentally falling back to sleep bit is a bit rough if you didn't plan it. And like, how did you accidentally go back to sleep? I'm waking up at... I guess if you go to bed at 1 and then you wake up at 2 p.m., that is over 12 hours. Do you at least feel refreshed from that? I hope so. Okay. I have... Where did it go? I had it just here. Okay. Have any of you read the Yellow Wallpaper before? It's been a little while for me. A tiny, tiny while. But before that, probably a few years. And before that, again, every few years. I guess first time I probably read this was when I was not very young, but decently young. And I feel like it hits a little different as you age. But I can also see reflections of it in other people as well. So I think I will start. So, The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. Actually, one more thing. I had to rearrange things a little bit as well. So just realizing, I need to move this and put this over here. It is very seldom that mere ordinary people like John and myself secure ancestral halls for the summer. A colonial mansion, a hereditary estate, I would say a haunted house, and reach the height of romantic felicity, but that would be asking too much of fate. Still, I will proudly declare that there is something queer about it. Else, why should it be let so cheaply? And why have stood so long untenanted? John laughs at me, of course, but one expects that in a marriage. John is practical in the extreme. He has no patience with faith, an intense horror of superstition, and he scoffs openly at any talk of things not to be felt and seen and put down in figures. John is a physician, and perhaps, I would not dare say it to a living soul, of course, but this is dead paper and a great relief to my mind. Perhaps that is one reason I do not get well faster. You see, he does not believe I am sick. And what can one do? If a physician of high standing and one's own husband assures friends and relatives that there is really nothing the matter with one but temporary nervous depression, slight hysterical tendency, what is one to do? My brother is also a physician and also of high standing, and he says the same thing. So I take phosphates or phosphites, whichever it is, and tonics, and journeys, and air, and exercise, and I'm absolutely forbidden to work until I am well again. Personally, I disagree with their ideas. Personally, I believe that congenial work with excitement and change would do me good. But what is one to do? I did write for a while in spite of them, but it does exhaust me a good deal. having to be so sly about it, or else meet with heavy opposition. I sometimes fancy that in my condition, if I had less opposition and more society and stimulus. But John says the very worst thing I can do is to think about my condition, and I confess it always makes me feel bad. So I will let it alone and talk about the house. The most beautiful place. It is quite alone, standing well back from the road, quite 3 miles from the village. It makes me think of English places that you read about, for there are hedges and walls and gates that lock, and lots of separate little houses for the gardeners and people. There is a delicious garden. I never saw such garden, large and shady, full of box-bordered paths, and lined with long grape-covered arbors with seats under them. There were greenhouses too, but they are all broken now. There was some legal trouble, I believe, something about the heirs and co-heirs. Anyhow, the place has been empty for years. That spoils my ghostliness, I am afraid, but I don't care. There is something strange about the house. I can feel it. I even said so to John one moonlit evening, but he said what I felt was a draft and shut the window. I get unreasonably angry with John sometimes. I'm sure I never used to be so sensitive. I think it is due to this nervous condition. But John says if I feel so, I shall neglect proper self-control. So I take pains to control myself, before him at least, and that makes me very tired. I don't like our room a bit. I wanted one downstairs that opened on the piazza and had roses all over the window, and such pretty old-fashioned chintz hangings, but John would not hear of it. He said that there was only one window and not room for 2 beds, and no near room for him if he took another. He is very careful and loving, and hardly lets me stir without special direction. I have a scheduled prescription for each hour in the day. He takes all care from me, and so I feel basely ungrateful to not value it more. He said we came here solely on my account, that I was to have perfect rest and all the air I could get. Your exercise depends on your strength, my dear, said he, and your food somewhat on your appetite, but air you can absorb all the time. So we took the nursery at the top of the house. It is a big, airy room, the whole floor nearly, with windows that look all ways, and air and sunshine galore. It was nursery first, and then playground and gymnasium, I should judge, for the windows are barred for little children, and there are rings and things in the walls. The paint and paper look as if a boys' school had used it. It is stripped off, the paper, in great patches all around the head of my bed, about as far as I can reach, and in a great place on the other side of the room low down. I never saw a worse paper in my life. One of those sprawling, flamboyant patterns committing every artistic sin. It is dull enough to confuse the eye in following, pronounced enough to constantly irritate and provoke study, and when you follow the lame, uncertain curves for a little distance, they suddenly commit suicide, plunge off at outrageous angles, destroy themselves in unheard-of contradictions. The color is repellent, almost revolting. A smoldering, unclean yellow, strangely faded by the slow-turning sunlight. It is a dull yet lurid orange in some places, a sickly sulphur tint in others. No wonder the children hated it. I should hate it myself if I had to live in this room long. There comes John, and I must put this away. He hates to have me write a word. We have been here 2 weeks, and I haven't felt like writing before since that first day. I am sitting by the window now, up in this atrocious nursery. There is nothing to hinder my writing as much as I please, save lack of strength. John is away all day, and even some nights when his cases are serious. I am glad my case is not serious. These nervous troubles are dreadfully depressing. John does not know how much I really suffer. He knows there is no reason to suffer, and that satisfies him. Of course, it is only nervousness. It does weigh on me so not to do my duty in any way. I meant to be such a help to John, such a real rest and comfort, and here I am, a comparative burden already. Nobody would believe what an effort it is to do what little I am able, to dress and entertain and order things. It is fortunate Mary is so good with the baby. Such a dear baby. And yet I cannot be with him. It makes me so nervous. I suppose John never was nervous in his life. He laughs at me so about this wallpaper. At first he meant to repaper the room, but afterwards he said that I was letting it get the better of me, and that nothing was worse for a nervous patient than to give way to such fancies. He said that after the wallpaper was changed, it would be the heavy bedstead, and then the barred windows, and then that gate at the head of the stairs, and so on. You know this place is doing you good, he said. And really, dear, I don't care to renovate the house just for a 3 months rental. Then do let us go downstairs, I said. There are such pretty rooms there. Then he took me in his arms and called me his blessed little goose, and said he would go down cellar if I wished, and have it whitewashed into the bargain. But he is right enough about the beds and windows and things. It is as airy and comfortable a room as anyone need wish, and of course, I would be so silly as to make him uncomfortable just for a whim. I'm really getting quite fond of the big room, but all but that horrid wallpaper. Out of one window I can see the garden, those mysterious deep-shaded arbors, the riotous old-fashioned flowers, and bushes and gnarly trees. Out of another I get a lovely view of the bay and a little private wharf belonging to the estate. There's a beautiful shaded lane that runs down there from the house. I always fancy I see people walking in these numerous paths and arbors, but John has cautioned me not to give way to fancy in the least. He says that with my imaginative power and habit of story-making, a nervous weakness like mine is sure to lead to all manner of excited fancies, and I ought to use my will and good sense to check the tendency. So I try. Yes. Sorry. Wow, this yellow, my favorite color. Yes, yellow is a very awkward color to work with. Extremely awkward. I feel like green is also in that category. For instance, like when you get darker for blue or purple, people don't have negative connotations of those colors usually, right? Darker green is a little bit rougher to work with, I feel like. People don't quite like it as much, necessarily. Like, you get the connotation of, say, evergreen trees, but you might also get the connotation of toxic sludge. Is this book a true recount or a story made up? It's a fictional story. Although, knowing how things were and could be, I'm sure situations like this could have happened. So, this is not someone's actual descent into badness. It's a writer's account. Yes. I also feel like when you yellow, people like sunshine yellow and pastel yellow. But when you get darker, you get muddied and you get brown, which is not necessarily people's favorite color. Or you get mustard, which again, people don't seem to like very much. You could theoretically get gold, but gold is usually more of a gradient, if you think about it. Or you need very specific color palette to indicate that. And again, it's very much like faded one and two of the other. Like, you don't need something metallic to represent gold, but doing like a non-metallic metal is more effort in painting. That's true. Mustard in certain lightings is confused with brown anyway. Yes. And then there's I feel like it's not as large of a gradient, I suppose, as a lot of blues and purples, and like even dark reds. People are not against Hmm. But yellow, green, orange, I suppose. Not popular colors necessarily in the West. Or certainly not yellow and orange. I think orange is one of the least liked colors, and yellow might also work for that. Hmm. But what is even dark orange? Orange is a warning color. Yellow is a warning color. Red is even a warning color, but not always a warning color. Maybe that's why we don't like them very much. Or at least they're warning colors to us. There are other creatures that prefer it more. Hmm. Okay. Sorry. Okay, blessed little goose. Right. Okay. Okay, we're not going to make him uncomfortable for a whim. I'm really getting quite fond of the big room, all but that horrid wallpaper. Out of one window, I can see the garden, those mysterious, deep shaded arbors, the riotous old flashing flowers, and bushes and gnarly trees. Okay, I read that part. Okay, I read that part too. I think sometimes that if I were only well enough to write a little, it would relieve me the press of ideas and rest me. But I find I get pretty tired when I try. It is so discouraging not to have any advice and companionship about my work. When I get really well, John says we will ask Cousin Henry and Julia down for a visit. A long visit. But he says he would as soon put fireworks in my pillowcase as to let me have those stimulating people about now. I wish I could get well faster. But I must not think about that. This paper looks to me as if it knew what a vicious influence it had. There's a recurrent spot where the pattern lolls like a broken neck and two bulbous eyes stare at you upside down. I get positively angry with the impertinence of it and the everlastingness. Up and down and sideways they crawl, and those absurd, unblinking eyes are everywhere. There is one place where two breaths didn't match, and the eyes go all up and down the line, one a little higher than the other. I never so much expression in an inanimate thing before, and we all know how much expression they have. I used to lie awake as a child and get more entertainment and terror out of blank walls and plain furniture than most children could find in a toy store. I remember what a kindly wink the knobs of our big old bureau used to have, and there was one chair that always seemed like a strong friend. I used to feel that if any of the other things looked too fierce, I could always hop into that chair and feel safe. The furniture in this room is no worse than inharmonious. However, for we had things to bring it all from downstairs. I suppose when this was used as a playroom, they had to take the nursery things out, and no wonder. I never saw such ravages as the children have made here. The wallpaper, as I said before, is torn off in spots, and it sticketh closer than a brother. They must have had perseverance as well as hatred. Then the floor is scratched and gouged and splintered. The plaster itself is dug out here and there, and this great heavy bed, which is all we found in the room, looks as if it had been through the wars. But I don't mind it a bit, only the paper. There comes John's sister, such a dear girl as she is, and so careful of me. I must not let her find me writing. She is a perfect and enthusiastic housekeeper, and hopes for no better profession. I verily believe she thinks it is the writing which makes me sick. But I can write when she is out, and see her a long way off from these windows. There's one that commands the road, a lovely, shaded, winding road, and one that looks just off over the country. A lovely country, too, full of great elms and velvet meadows. This wallpaper has a kind of sub-pattern in a different shade, a particularly irritating one, for you can only see it in certain lights, and not clearly then. But in the places where it isn't faded, and where the sun is just so, I can see a strange, provoking, formless sort of figure that seems to sulk about behind that silly and conspicuous front design. There's sister on the stairs. Quick drink. These kids write too much. These kids play too many video games. Yeah. Writing is not good for women. Not many things are. What are you supposed to do? This was written by a woman before 1921. That much I can tell you. And I mean, you want to call her a child. The person who's writing this, a kid. She does have a. She's married to a doctor and she has a child herself. So she's at least probably 18. Probably. But the doctor's sister, aspiring only to be a housekeeper, is a little strange. But, well, maybe more so just a woman of the house, a housekeeper. Oh, I shouldn't say housekeeper, homemaker. That's the phrase, isn't it? Thank you. Oh, I didn't turn those off. Give me a second. I mean, I didn't mean to turn it off. It's just I didn't want the noise to be like too bothersome, so I was going to mute them but have them show up. It did show up, didn't it? Let me have a look. Okay, I shouldn't have stream alerts on. I didn't see it pop up, but maybe that's just because I wasn't quite looking right. Where is it? Where is it? I can't see the box. Did it move? Box move? Oh, again, welcome X. Let me see. So old? Yes. This is public domain. It also actually probably explains why it was in so many book collections that were given to students. Wouldn't have to pay to reprint it, unlike a lot of other favorites. That actually probably explains quite a bit about a lot of the ones and why they've I feel like they've probably stagnated for shorter stories because copyright laws are so long in the US. I say 1921. That's, I don't know if the exact date where it tends to get a little rough. Oh, the speaker. Damn, so old. 1820. The speaker, you mean the person who wrote the book? Or are you talking about me? I can't say I'm not that old. Okay. I will figure that out later. The noise. We'll see how often it ends up coming up. And at least it's not the normal thing. It's a quieter thing, even if it's not fully quiet. I'm the narrator. The speaker, though, like the narrator is the one in the book, isn't it? The writer. They're all one and the same. Different titles, same concept here. Like I guess I am the narrator, but at the same time, if this were an audio book, what would the title be? For the is it really just narrator for the person who reads it? I suppose it is. I suppose it is. But speaker is another word for narrator, isn't it? You can see why I was a little confused. Okay. Well, the 4th of July is over. The people are gone and I am tired out. John thought it might do me good to see a little company, so we just had Mother and Nellie and the children down for a week. Of course I didn't do a thing. Jenny sees to everything now. But it tired me all the same. John says if I don't pick up faster, he shall send me to Ware Mitchell in the fall. But I don't want to go there at all. I had a friend who was in his hands once, and she says he is just like John and my brother, only more so. Besides, it is such an undertaking to go so far. I don't feel as if it was worthwhile to turn my hands over for anything, and I'm getting dreadfully fretful and querulous. I cry at nothing, and cry most of the time. Of course I don't when John is here, or anybody else, but when I am alone. And I am alone a good deal just now. John is kept in town very often by serious cases, and Jenny is good and lets me alone when I want her to. So I walk a little in the garden or down that lovely lane, sit on the porch under the roses, and lie down up here a good deal. I'm getting really fond of the room in spite of the wallpaper. Perhaps because of the wallpaper. It dwells in my mind so. I lie here on this great immovable bed. It is nailed down, I believe, and follow that pattern about by the hour. It is as good as gymnastics, I assure you. I start, we'll say, at the bottom, down in the corner over there where it has not been touched, and I determine for the thousandth time that I will follow that pointless pattern to some sort of conclusion. I know a little of the principle of design, and I know this thing was not arranged on any laws of radiation, or alternation, or repetition, or symmetry, or anything else I have ever heard of. It is repeated, of course, by the breaths, but not otherwise. Looked at one way, each breath stands alone, the bloated curves and flourishes, a kind of debased Romanesque with delirium tremens, go waddling up and down in isolated columns of fatuity. And someone is crying outside, so I have to go grab them real quick. I'm not entirely sure my visitor who will not leave me alone wants. Well, he wants to interrupt. But he does not want to join. He might meow in the background. I suppose all the better from keeping me staring at the yellow wallpaper for too long. And there's plenty of room up here on the desk for him. He does not seem to want to care. He just wants to cry. Actually, maybe I'll pick him up. Maybe he will come up. I'm trying to trap him. He in front, like right under the mic. Will it work? Oh, he's gonna flop on the keyboard. Okay, I think. Can you hear him? Oh, oh. He's a little perturbed by the mic. Oh. He's rubbing. Okay, no. I just have to give him a good place. Oh, no. I'm so sorry. I thought that maybe he would settle down in my arms underneath the mic, but he seems to want to just rub on the mic instead. Okay. Will you be good? Will you settle underneath? No, you're gonna rub on the pop filter. Okay. You're a bad boy. Come on. Come on. Maybe if I just move the mic a little bit up higher. Okay. No. That does what he wants. Yeah, it kind of does. Not everything, but a lot. Moving mic. Okay. Okay, there we go. Starting to settle. Good boy. Okay. Yeah, he's wrapped in my arm. Now I can't really do a whole lot. But he's not touching the mic, which is good. He's not touching the mic. He's just kind of flopped really awkwardly. Like his he's finished the flop. Okay. And he's got his foot on the enter key. Okay. He might be purring into the mic, I can't really tell. Another second. Okay. Oh. Okay. He's still trying to get comfy. I'm gonna drop the mic lever. Can you hear him? He might actually just be, what's the phrase? Being picked up by the noise filter, actually, with the purring noise. We'll see how this goes. I actually have the mic pointed down at him, so he might not enjoy this. He might think it's a toy. Okay, how about this? Okay, this is better. He's getting filtered. Yeah. Well, maybe while I'm talking, you might catch his purr in the background. So she was threatening, or She was being threatened to get sent to where, Mitchell? Oh, he just... Okay. I don't know if this is going to work for him. He just kind of flopped off a little bit. So he had to get up, and now he's trying to rub on the mic again. What a cat. Okay. So, she cries most of the time because of the wallpaper. I know a little of the principle of design. I know this thing was not arranged on any laws of radiation or alternation or repetition. Okay, I read that line. Or symmetry or anything else I'd ever heard of. It is repeated, of course, by the breaths, but not otherwise. Debased Romanesque. Okay. But, on the other hand, they connect diagonally, and the sprawling outline runs off in great slanting waves of optic horror, like a lot of wallowing seaweeds in full chase. The whole thing goes horizontally, too, or at least it seems so, and I exhaust myself in trying to distinguish the order of its going in that direction. They have used a horizontal breath for a frieze, and that adds wonderfully to the confusion. There is one end of the room where it is almost intact, and there, where the crosslights fade and the low sun shines directly upon it, I can almost fancy radiation after all. The interminable grotesques seem to form around a common center and rush off in headlong plunges of equal distraction. It makes me tired to follow it. I will take a nap, I guess. Okay, I think he's settled. He's settled. Mostly. He's not very comfy, and neither am I. I don't know why I should write this. I don't want to. I don't feel able. And I know John would think it absurd, but I must say what I feel and think in some way. It is such a relief. But the effort is getting to be greater than the relief. Half the time now I am awfully lazy and lie down ever so much. John says I mustn't lose my strength, and has made me take cod liver oil and lots of tonics and things, to say nothing of ale and wine and rare meat. Dear John, he loves me very dearly, and hates to have me sick. I tried to have a real earnest reasonable talk with him the other day, and tell him how much I wish he would let me go and make a visit to Cousin Henry and Julia. But he said I wasn't able to go, nor able to stand it after I got there, and I did not make out a very good case for myself, for I was crying before I had finished. It is getting to be a great effort for me to think straight. Just this nervous weakness, I suppose. And dear John gathered me up in his arms, and just carried me upstairs and laid me on the bed, and sat by me and read to me till it tired my head. He said I was his darling, and his comfort, and all he had, and that I must take care of myself for his sake, and keep well. He says no one but myself can help me out of it, that I must use my will and self-control, and not let any silly fancies run away with me. There is one comfort: the baby is well and happy. Does not have to occupy this nursery with the horrid wallpaper. If we had not used it, that blessed child would have. What a fortunate escape. Why, I wouldn't have a child of mine, an impressionable little thing, in such a room for worlds. I never thought of it before, but it is lucky that John kept me here after all. I can stand it so much easier than a baby, you see. Of course, I never mention it to them any more. I am too wise, but I keep watch of it all the same. There are things in that paper that nobody knows but me, or ever will. Behind that outside pattern, the dim shapes get clearer every day. It is always the same shape, only very numerous. And it is like a woman stooping down and creeping about behind that pattern. I don't like it a bit. I wonder. I begin to think. I wish John would take me away from here. It is so dark. It is so hard to talk with John about my case, because he is so wise and because he loves me so. But I tried it last night. It was moonlight. The moon shines in all around, just as the sun does. I hate to see it sometimes. It creeps so slowly, and always comes by. in in by one room or another. John was asleep, and I hated to waken him, so I kept still and watched the moonlight on that undulating wallpaper until I felt creepy. A faint figure behind seemed to shake the pattern, just as if she wanted to get out. I got up softly and went to feel and see if the paper did move, and when I came back, John was awake. "What is it, little girl?" he said. "Don't go walking about like that. You'll get cold." I thought it was a good time to talk, so I told him that I really was not gaining here, and that I wished he would take me away. "Why, darling," said he, "our lease will be up in 3 weeks, and I can't see how to leave before. The repairs are not done at home, and I cannot possibly leave town just now. Of course, if you were in any danger I could and would, but you really are better, dear, whether you can see it or not. I am a doctor, dear, and I know. You are gaining flesh and color, and your appetite is better. I really feel much easier about you." "I don't weigh a bit more," said I, "nor as much, and my appetite may be better in the evening when you are here, but it is worse in the morning when you are away." "Bless her little heart," he said, he with a hug. She shall be as sick as she pleases. But now let's improve the shining hours by going to sleep and talk about it in the morning." "And you won't go away?" I asked gloomily. "Why, how can I, dear? There's only 3 weeks more, and then we will take a nice little trip of a few days while Jenny is getting the house ready. Really, dear, you are better." "Better in body, perhaps," I began, and stopped short, for he sat up straight and looked at me with such a stern, reproachful look that I could not say another word. "My darling," said he, "I beg of you, for my sake and for our child's sake, as well as for your own, that you will never for one instant let that idea enter your head. There is nothing so dangerous, so fascinating to a temperament like yours. It is a false and foolish fancy. Can you not trust me as a physician when I tell you so?" So, of course, I said no more on that score, and we went to sleep before long. He thought I was asleep at first, but I wasn't. I lay there for hours, trying to decide whether that front pattern and the back pattern really did move together or separately. On a pattern like this, by daylight, there's a lack of sequence, a defiance of law that is a constant irritant to a normal mind. The color is hideous enough and unreliable enough and infuriating enough, but the pattern is torturing. I'm gonna pause right here so I can read chat. Yes, the whole thing about, well, just, what is it? Either that either that curtain goes or I do. That's the quote, isn't it? So that might be a little fitting here, except either this wallpaper goes or I do. Maybe it is wallpaper. I feel like it's curtains, though. Oh, it's supposed to be what, an Oscar Wilde quote, or is it a misquote? They've been here. I think it's supposed to be like a summer vacation that she's supposed to be on. It's not been very long though, I feel like. So like, they're probably like 2 months in, because summer vacation was sort of a thing, right? Like, oh, you go away for the season. It makes sense. You go to your summer home, and this is the summer home. Their summer rental. Don't let the idea that your mind is not as strong as your body permeate you. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, let me just I can double check real quick. Like, how old is it? I just need to work around the cat. He actually settled again. And I only have one hand. I only have one hand. 2 months and 3 weeks. Thank you for. Oh, no. Head pet. Oh, head pet might be over there. I don't know why everything moved. Oh, now I do actually, because it's Shoost. Oh, that's why. It's not prepared for Shoost. Oh, the same thing probably actually for the, like, squeezy, the watery. I'll have to fix that when I see it. Okay. Let me head. Can I head back on this one? I can. Gotta go face your fears. Yeah, Cat is still here. Cat is still here. Cat is gonna be here for a while, I think. Okay. head back and head to this. Okay, no, I don't want that. I want this instead. How far down do I have to go? How old is this? It's more like release date 99. No, that's just the Gutenberg one. Okay, so the author died in 1935, so she had to write it before she died. She had to write it before she died. Do they have a thing about... No, they don't have anything about when it was written. I guess if I just pop this back up. Yeah, they don't say when it was written. I'll just have to look that up separately. I can't type. No, it's hard. If you really haven't read this before, okay, it will come. It will come. It will come. Okay. The pattern is torturing. You think you have mastered it, but just as you get well underway in following, it turns a back somersault, and there you are. It slaps you in the face, knocks you down, and tramples upon you. It is like a bad dream. The outside pattern is a florid arabesque reminding one of a fungus. If you can imagine a toadstool in joints, an interminable string of toadstools, budding and sprouting in endless convolutions, why, that is something like it. That is, sometimes. There is one marked peculiarity about this paper, a thing nobody seems to notice but myself, and that is, it changes as light changes. When the sun shoots in through the east window, I always watch for that first long, straight ray. It changes so quickly that I never can quite believe it. That is why I watch it always. By moonlight, the moon shines all night when there is a moon. I wouldn't know it was the same paper. At night, in any kind of light. In twilight, candlelight, lamplight, and worst of all, by moonlight. It becomes bars. The outside pattern, I mean. The woman behind it is as plain as can be. I didn't realize for a long time what the thing was that showed behind that dim sub-pattern, but now I am quite sure it is a woman. By daylight, she is subdued, quiet. I fancy it is the pattern that keeps her so still. It is so puzzling. It keeps me quiet by the hour. I lie down ever so much now. John says it is good for me, and to sleep all I can. Indeed, he started the habit by making me lie down for an hour after each meal. It is a very bad habit, I am convinced, for you see, I don't sleep. And that cultivates deceit, for I don't tell him I'm awake. Oh no. The fact is, I am getting a little afraid of John. He seems very queer sometimes, and even Jenny has an inexplicable look. It strikes me occasionally, just as a scientific hypothesis, that perhaps it is the paper. I have watched John when he did not know I was looking, and come into the room suddenly on the most innocent excuses, and I've caught him several times looking at the paper. And Jenny, too. I caught Jenny with her hand on it once. She didn't know I was in the room, and when I asked her in a very quiet voice, with the most restrained manner possible, what she was doing with the paper, she turned around as if she had been caught stealing and looked quite angry. Asked me why I should frighten her so. Then she said that the paper stained everything it touched, that she had found yellow smooches all on my clothes and John's, and she wished we would be more careful. Did not that sound innocent? But I know she was studying that pattern, and I am determined that nobody shall find it out but myself. Life is very much more exciting now than it used to be. You see, I have something more to expect, to look forward to watch. I really do eat better, and I am more quiet than I was. John is so pleased to see me improve. He laughed a little the other day and said I seemed to be flourishing in spite of my wallpaper. I turned it off with a laugh. I had no intention of telling him it was because of the wallpaper. He would make fun of me. He might even want to take me away. I don't want to leave now until I have found it out. There is a week more, and I think that will be enough. I'm feeling ever so much better. I don't sleep much at night, for it is so interesting to watch the developments, but I sleep a good deal in the daytime. In the daytime, it is tiresome and perplexing. There are always new shoots on the fungus, and new shades of yellow all over it. I cannot keep count of them, though I have tried conscientiously. It is the strangest yellow, that wallpaper. It makes me think of all the yellow things I ever saw. Not beautiful ones like buttercups, but old, foul, bad, yellow things. But there is something else about that paper. The smell. I noticed it the moment we came into the room. With so much air and sun, it was not bad. Now we have a week of fog and rain, and whether the windows are open or not, the smell is here. It creeps all over the house. I find it hovering in the dining room, skulking in the parlor, hiding in the wall, lying in wait for me on the stairs. It gets into my hair. Even when I go to ride, if I turn my head suddenly and surprise it, there is that smell. Such a peculiar odor, too. I've spent hours in trying to analyze it, to find what it smelled like. It is not bad at first, and very gentle, but quite the subtlest, most enduring odor I have ever met. In this damp weather, it is awful. I wake up in the night and find it hanging over me. It used to disturb me at first. I thought seriously of burning the house to reach the smell. But now I am used to it. The only thing I can think of is that it is the color of the paper. A yellow smell. Hello, Dirk. There is a very funny mark on this wall, low down near the mopboard, a streak that runs around the room. It goes behind every piece of furniture except the bed, a long, straight, even smooch, as if it had been rubbed over and over. I wonder how it was done and who did it, and what they did it for. Round and round and round, round and round and round. It makes me dizzy. I have discovered something at last. Through watching so much at night, when it changes so, I have finally found out. The front pattern does move, and no wonder. The woman behind shakes it. Sometimes I think there's a great many women behind, and sometimes only one, and she crawls around fast, and her crawling shakes it all over. And then, in the very bright spots, she keeps still. And in the very shady spots, she just takes hold of the bars and shakes them hard. And she is all the time trying to climb through. But nobody could climb through that pattern. It strangles so. I think that is why it has so many heads. They get through, and then the pattern strangles them off and turns them upside down and makes their eyes white. If those heads were covered or taken off, it would not be half so bad. I think that woman gets out in the daytime, and I'll tell you why privately. I've seen her. I can see her out of every one of my windows. It is the same woman, I know, for she is always creeping, and most women do not creep by daylight. I see her on that long shaded lane, creeping up and down. I see her in those dark grape arbors, creeping all around the garden. I see her on that long road under the trees, creeping along, and when a carriage comes, she hides under the blackberry vines. I don't blame her a bit. It must be very humiliating to be caught creeping by daylight. I always lock the door when I creep by daylight. I can't do it at night, for I know John would suspect something at once. And John is so queer now that I don't want to irritate him. I wish he would take another room. Besides, I don't want anybody to get that woman out at night but myself. I often wonder if she could see out of all the windows at once. But turn as fast as I can. I can only see out of one at one time. And though I always see her, she may be able to creep faster than I can turn. I have watched her sometimes away off in the open country, creeping as fast as a cloud shadow in a high wind. If only that top pattern could be gotten off from the under one. I mean to try it, little by little. I have found out another funny thing, but I shan't tell it this time. It does not do to trust people too much. There are only 2 more days to get this paper off, and I believe John is beginning to notice. Oh, cat. Oh, cat. Sorry, my cat is here. He's right under the mic. Okay. He's gonna... Okay, that was him jumping down. I think he's finding his own spot to stay. He's creeping about in the daylight. What little daylight we have left. I have found out another funny thing, but I shan't tell it this time. It does not do to trust people too much. There are only 2 more days to get this paper off, and I believe John is beginning to notice. I don't like the look in his eyes. And I heard him ask Jenny a lot of professional questions about me. She had a very good report to give. She said I slept a great deal of the daytime. John knows I don't sleep very well at night, for all I'm so quiet. He asked me all sorts of questions, too, and pretended to be very loving and kind, as if I couldn't see through him. Oh, he wants out. Creeping him about under the PC light? That, he can't quite do that right now. You might be able to hear in the background crying about getting out now. He wants to be out of this wretched room. There's not so much PC light here. I do have, like a lit up PC, but not nearly as bells and whistles as some other people. I don't have the fans, for instance, with the RGB. Or the memory sticks, whatever they're called, with the RGB either. I went with the plainer looking ones. I'm going to be right back. There is a thing that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. It could be an elf, but it's not an elf exactly. It's a cat. Okay. Still, I don't wonder he acts so, sleeping under this paper for 3 months. There we have it, it's 3 months. It only interests me, but I feel sure John and Jenny are secretly affected by it. So yes, they have a 3-month stint in this house. So this is like a summer visitation. And it also fits with the July thing. So she was here for probably all of June, all of July, and all of August. So appropriate time of year for this. We're getting to, I guess it's a bit early. This would probably be a bit better for a very late September thing. But we're still covering the the season of summer. Hurrah! This is the last day, but it is enough. John is to stay in town overnight and won't be out until this evening. Jenny wanted to sleep with me, the sly thing, but I told her I should undoubtedly rest better for a night all alone. That was clever, for I really wasn't alone a bit. As soon as it was moonlight and that poor thing began to crawl and shake the pattern, I got up and ran to help her. Sorry. Sneaking drinks. Okay, 1/4 of the year. Yeah, it's a season. It's a seasonal home, and he's a doctor, and she's from a family that produces doctors. So of course they would have a summer home. I pulled and she shook. I shook and she pulled. And before morning we had peeled off yards of that paper. A strip about as high as my head and half around the room. And then, when the sun came out and that awful pattern began to laugh at me, I declared I would finish it today. We go away tomorrow, and they are moving all my furniture down again and leave things as they were before. Jenny looked at the wall in amazement, but I told her merrily that I did it out of pure spite at the vicious thing. She laughed and said she wouldn't mind doing it herself, and I must not get tired. How she betrayed herself at that time. But I am here, and no person touches this paper but me. Not alive. She tried to get me out of the room. It was too patent. But I said it was so quiet and empty and clean now that I believed I would lie down again and sleep all I could, and not to wake me even for dinner. I would call when I woke. So now she is gone, and the servants are gone, and the things are gone, and there is nothing left but that great bedstead nailed down with the canvas mattress we found on it. We shall sleep downstairs tonight and take the boat home tomorrow. I quite enjoy the room, now that it is bare again. How those children did tear about here. The bedstead is barely gnawed, but I must get to work. I have locked the door and thrown the key down into the front path. I don't want to go out. I don't want to have anybody come in till John comes. I want to astonish him. I've got a rope up here that even Jenny did not find. If that woman does get out and tries to get away, I can tie her. But I forgot that I could not reach far without anything to stand on. This bed will not move. I tried to lift and push it until I was lame, and then I got so angry I bit off a little piece at one corner, but it hurt my teeth. Then I peeled off all the paper I could reach standing on the floor. It sticks horribly and the pattern just enjoys it, but all those strangled heads and bulbous eyes and waddling fungus growths just shriek with derision. I am getting angry enough to do something desperate. To jump out the window would be an admirable exercise, but the bars are too strong to even try. Besides, I wouldn't do it. Of course not. I know well enough that a step like that is improper and might be misconstrued. I don't want to look out of the windows even. There are so many of those creeping women, and they creep so fast. I wonder if they all come out of the wallpaper as I did. But I am securely fastened now by my well-hidden rope. You don't get me out in the road there. I suppose I shall have to get back behind the pattern when it comes night, and that is hard. It is so pleasant to be out in this great room and creep about as I please. I don't want to go outside. I won't, even if Jenny asks me to. For outside you have to creep on the ground, and everything is green instead of yellow. But here I can creep smoothly on the floor, and my shoulder just fits into that long smooch around the wall, so I cannot lose my way. Why, here's John at the door. It is no use, young man. You can't open it. How hard he does call and pound. Now he's crying for an axe. It would be a shame to break down that beautiful door. John, dear, said I in the gentlest voice, the key is down by the front steps, under a plantain leaf. That silenced him for a few minutes. Then he said, very quietly indeed, open the door, my darling. I can't, said I. The key is down by the front door under a plantain leaf. And then I said it again, several times, very gently and slowly, and said it so often that he had to go and see. And he got it, of course, and came in. He stopped shortly by the door. What is the matter? He cried. For God's sake, what are you doing? I kept on creeping just the same, but I looked at him over my shoulder. I've got out at last, said I, in spite of you and Jane, and I've pulled off most of the paper, so you can't put me back. Now why should that man have fainted? But he did, and right across my path by the wall, so that I had to creep over him every time. That is the end of the Yellow Wallpaper. The rest of the book is all information about copyright. I'm gonna take another quick drink. Oh, what did you think? Let me just really quick. Now I have both hands free. How old is the Yellow Wallpaper? It is a famous enough piece. Oh, it's from 1892, and it was published in the New England Magazine. Magazines were a rather good source for short fiction. I know it's a bit, how to put it, uh, I don't want to say strange to say. It was supposed to be a joke back in the day that you only read Playboy for the stories or like for the articles, but actually Playboy did have quite a lot of writers, good ones too, very good ones. Either people who had become famous or people who were already kind of famous write short stories in there. Even into the 2000s, they had them. And there's other people who also wrote for magazines. I mean, Lovecraft was a writer for that sort of thing, like weird magazines. And I suppose if you're being paid by the word, is it paid by the word? I wonder, or paid by the letter? Uh, that might even out to be the same thing in the end. So maybe by word. Well, then you'd be wanting to use a lot smaller words. Hmm. And you can't even read Playboy for the articles. Is it gone? I don't honestly know. I haven't really looked at it in a very long time. I haven't read it in a very long time. It's only online since 2000. Mm. But even Wikipedia talks about how it had Ian Fleming and Margaret Atwood and Roald Dahl and people like that who were published in Playboy. I think when I read it, one of the pieces they had, uh, not Chuck Palahniuk, is that how you pronounce it? I can almost spell it, but I cannot 100% spell it. I feel like there was a short story of his in there, or it was a story by someone who was somewhat following his footsteps. It actually may have been Chuck Palahniuk. I don't know how to pronounce it. It was something about zombies. When was that? When was that? A short fiction. Uh, no, probably. Actually, no. He has a lot of stuff in there. It was actually, yeah. Mm, it might have actually been uh, zombie or cannibal of his. I didn't quite realize. Just looking at the list of short fiction that he's written, it's just kind of okay. Playboy, 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 Playboy. There's other things in there too. There's modern short stories and Vice and uh, Dark Delicacies 3 and Nightmare Magazine and Fangoria. Just thinking about some of the other magazines that were produced back in the day. I wonder if some of these still exist. Just thinking, like, there was, what, Cthulhu Sex? I remember getting a few hard copies of that. Does it still exist now? Uh, it's really actually hard to tell. Oh, the stuttering is actually probably more so the. I can. Can you hear me now? Okay. I just turned off noise removal. We'll have to see how that goes. Uh, the stuttering was probably more so from the audio production because again I haven't soundproofed. I actually built up a map of my room and I'm trying to figure out the best way to do it. Oh no, no. A slight hysterical tendency when I try and mention Playboy. No, no. Audio sounds fine. Okay, well I still just turned off the noise, so you'll probably hear a lot more clicking and stuff and maybe keyboard noises. But yeah, so like, is Cthulhu Sex still being printed? Or probably not. Probably not. It's kind of like how long could that have existed as a content? Oh, audio was always fine? Ah, you're just making fun of me? It's no fair. It's no fair. Every time I go to turn on and off my noise removal and video broadcasting, it makes me silent for a good like 15 seconds, and I can't tell if it's going through to you guys or not. But yeah, okay, so oh, there's actually a Wired article on. There's a magazine article about Cthulhu sex. Oh, it's been defunct since 2006. Oh well. Okay. Well then, I guess that tells you a little bit. Oh, you can still purchase some. I wonder. I think I threw mine out though. Oh well. That's not really safe for here anyway. But it does exist. It did exist. Someone did try and make a Cthulhu sex magazine. Okay. Next short story. I have to pick one out. I definitely knew I wanted to read the Yellow Wallpaper. I wasn't certain about the rest, but I was thinking of Haunter in the Dark or something like that. I just have to figure out which of these books it's in. I've read all my Lovecraft books. It's simply a question of which exact book it's in. And for some of these, it's been Blood, Sex, and Tentacles. Is that the tagline for Cthulhu Sex? It makes sense. I mean, I still can't believe what they did though. I got some volumes of it from a convention, and they just handed them out to 15-year-olds. Well, to young people, just kind of a right in front of parents. Yes, this is the exact audience that you want to hit up with this magazine. Then again, we took them, and the parents didn't seem to mind, so I suppose that says something else. Hmm. Indoctrination? Yeah, maybe I had already read Cthulhu by that point, though, like most of Lovecraft's works. Hmm. Let's see. Okay. The Heart, Red Hook. No, no, no. I don't want that in here. The Cats of Ulthar. Nope, nope, nope. So it's not in the Dreams of White House. Let's see what else. Okay, is it in here? Okay, this one. It's in the Call of Cthulhu and Other Weird Stories. But then there's also the Thing on the Doorstep. Thing on the Doorstep or the Haunter in the Dark? Which one? Which one? You can hear. You can probably hear the books too. Maybe. 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 Like thonk, thonk, thonk. They're only soft cover, so the thonks won't be quite as big. But yes, I was looking at my. I actually measured out my room to see how big it was. Actually, I wonder how big it is. I measured it, but I don't remember what the measurements were offhand. Where is it? Where is it? Did I save it here? I save it here. So many files. I have so many files. Where did I put it? I put it. How many days ago was that? How many days ago? I was also measuring out some things, for instance, like, oh, the electrical outlets are here, but the air conditioner is there, or rather the AC, and is that going to be a bother if I move it there? And oh, I could put it in the closet, but there's no power there, which would be a bigger issue. And also because the facing is not very lucky, so to speak, for other reasons. And then, it would also be great to place it here, except for the fact that the floor is slanted, so that might be a little awkward. And like, this is a really good position, but this space is so large, and what can I do to cut down on the echo from that space? What can I do? What can I do? Let's see, where is it? Where's the room diagram? And I know I just. Thank you, Phonologist, for the raid. You were just reading as well, weren't you? I think. Let me check. I will be reading shortly. Yes, you're just doing readings too. I saw you started around the same time as me. I'm just looking at how to really quickly, like before I read another short story, I'm trying to figure out like the best way to soundproof my room and just throwing up the Lord of the Rings. Yeah, I just finished the Yellow Wallpaper. I have to pick out the next one. I think I'm gonna do Haunter in the Dark though. I think. Yes, welcome, welcome, readers. I will be continuing with the short stories in a minute. In a minute. It's like once you see why I have uh, NVIDIA Broadcast Echo up, Echo removal. Okay. So yeah, this is about the room layout I have to deal with, roughly. I mean, some of these things, a lot of the furniture can be moved. I have a radiator on one side of the wall. Uh, but so yeah, like the small area by the radiator could be fine, except for the fact that the air conditioner is right above that, and that side of the room, that small area is not, the floor is not flat. And yeah, so I have been talking before about how I measure myself, or I measure the room in terms of myself a lot, and thinking like, oh, so it's like two of me. Hello, Steph. So yeah, like, oh, this is two of me, and then reading like, oh, it's 18 feet. That's actually quite large, isn't it? And the same thing, like 14 feet. That's more, quite a bit more than two of me. And again, I guess the same with 18 feet. That's like three of me. So yes, I have to figure out what I'm going to do here, because the best option would be to put. I can't draw a shape, can I? I guess would be to like have something behind me. I guess like create a fake corridor, but I don't know what to put there. I don't like a new standard measurement. I mean, um do you not use your thumb for measurement, or your arm, like your forearm for quick measurements, or your height as a measurement? You do? For instance, planning out where a couch was and just thinking, if I lay down on the floor here, I can see if the couch will fit because I fit on the couch. It's, like just need a little bit of extra room on the side too. So just lying down on the floor in an empty living room, as you do. It's not that strange. The real estate agent didn't look too horribly put off by it. mm. But yes, so kind of well, I think I can lay down on this floor at least twice over, and that's about it. And I guess in hindsight, yes, it would probably take over 3 times for me to lay on the long side where my desk is. I didn't actually think my closet was that big either, or that closet, I should say, because I do have another closet that's not illustrated. But the other one is much more spacious, and that's where all my painting supplies are, and sewing supplies. I do know I need to move the other desk right now. That's right behind the chair, and the second chair can be moved, but it should be attached to the desk, since that is my cat's chair. It is the decoy chair. I was thinking, like, do I need a decoy keyboard too? Maybe I should just use my other desk as a completely decoy desk for him and put my desktop on there. Like, you're not supposed to put your desktop on the floor, right? Because things can drop in and it's not supposed to be very good for the health or something. Decoy keyboards don't work, really. That's yeah. Well, he actually used to. This is a very bad habit. He actually used to. My cat sleep on top of my computer on the tower, which is not strictly a good thing. He left a little bit of a dent up there, but it's a very flat base. It's a very plain looking case, relatively. So I had to actually give the computer a good summer cleaning to get all the fur out of it. There was a lot of fur. That cat did numbers on it. And I had someone else I was talking to. I would call him a friend. We were talking about cooling systems because I mentioned I was cleaning out my computer, and I showed him a picture of it because it has a one of those RBG light up areas on the cooler. And he said that mostly came with water cooling computers or water cooling systems. It's kind of a I don't know if mine is water cooling or not. I ordered the computer, but I wasn't I don't say I wasn't paying attention, but uh mm, I don't necessarily know what all the pieces are. So I guess you're supposed to change out the water on water cooling units on computers, and I haven't done that in over a year. I don't know how often I need to do that. I actually should look that up. I guess the water can get gunky or something, or maybe it just evaporates after a little while. My computer hasn't had any problems, so at least that's fine. But yeah, it's a little worrisome. And thank you for the follow, Steph. Spraying your PC with water every 10 minutes? Oh, we don't need that extra humidity here. We don't need that extra humidity. Gigi, don't. Uh, it feels like swimming outside as it is. If I just open my window, I think that would be all I would need for water cooling, theoretically, except for the fact that it's over 80 degrees, sometimes into the 90s, with the thickness of the air, like you're swimming through it. You've gone through. How much money do you have that you can go through 12 GPUs? Those are one of the expensive components, right? The only reason I went with a pre-built was so that I could be in line for a GPU. You're just capping. I don't actually know what the temperature is outside. Like I was outside earlier. I had to water my plants before I came here, uh, so I don't know what the exact temperature is. Like it doesn't feel too horrible if you're out for short stints anyway. And also the sun isn't quite as shining today. But that's the phrase. The bigger issue is definitely humidity. Humidity is the killer. But yeah, I was in. The only reason I got a pre-built machine was so I could get in line for I think 3080. That was the one that came out like 2 years ago or so. Save on gas bill for eggs on your CPU. I don't think mine gets that hot, but I'm not particularly near it. My laptop does probably get that hot, honestly. But that might also be the fact that it comes with its own spicy spice packets that I am sort of sitting on. Not literally right now. Exactly. I actually do have my arms around the cabinet though that the spicy pillow's in. So if it goes on fire, I'll be the first to know. Sitting in a radiation suit. Backyard's all black. Mine's all crunchy from the not having watered it. There's a bit of a drought. Let's see. So I was gonna read the Haunter of the Dark. It's 336. So it's about 30 pages. Let me grab it. Let's see, 336. 336. Okay, how long is this? Dun, dun, dun. Okay. Okay. Just thinking, oh, this one's going to eventually be hard to read, but that will come to it when it comes to it. Very likely. Very, very likely. Okay. One quick sip before I start, because this is going to be 30 pages. I'm also going to quickly change the title. So, for some reason I always thought it was Haunter in the Dark, not Haunter of the Dark. But I might just be confusing with the thing on the doorstep. Yeah, 30 pages isn't so bad. Posture check? You can't posture check me right now. You can't posture check it right now. I can't have good posture. Can I have good posture? Because of the way that the mic is, I am just going to actually be reading the book. So maybe if I move the mic really far out. Yeah, okay, this is going to be interesting. Hold on. Okay, I might move the mic in such a way that it makes the mic stop. But we'll see. Okay, posture is mostly checked. Let me just move another book and like another thing or two. I am watered. I am watered. Just eat the mic. I. That, uh, it's a little bit inorganic to eat, though the pop filter could probably be eaten with a little bit of work. The pop filter is made of soft material on the inside. This time it's going to be from an actual book. Oh, did I hit it? Did I hit the button? Sorry about. Okay, should be done. Make sure the mic is all done. When it comes to meat, I like it rare. I suppose for vegetables, I like them. Actually, I do like them raw. I like to eat things raw. The Haunter of the Dark, dedicated to Robert Bloch. I have seen the dark universe yawning, where the black planets roll without aim, where they roll in their horror unheeded, without knowledge or luster or name. Nemesis. Cautious investigators will hesitate to challenge the common belief that Robert Blake was killed by lightning or by some profound nervous shock derived from an electrical discharge. It is true that the window he faced was unbroken, but nature has shown herself capable of many freakish performances. The expression on his face may have easily arisen from some obscure muscular source unrelated to anything he saw, while the entries in his diary are clearly the result of a fantastic imagination aroused by certain local superstitions and by certain old matters he had uncovered. As for the anomalous conditions at the deserted church on Federal Hill, the shrewd analyst is not slow in attributing them to some charlatanry, conscious or unconscious, without at least some of which Blake was secretly connected. For after all, the victim was a writer and painter wholly devoted to the fields of myth, dream, terror, and superstition, and avid in his quest for scenes and effects of a bizarre spectral sort. His earlier stay in the city, a visit to a strange old man as deeply given to occult and forbidden lore as he, had ended amidst death and flame, and it must have been some morbid instinct which drew him back from his home in Milwaukee. He may have known of the old stories despite his statement to the contrary in the diary, and his death may have nipped in the bud some stupendous hoax destined to have a literary reflection. Clearly. Among those, however, who have examined and correlated all this evidence, there remain several who cling to a less rational and commonplace theories. They are inclined to take much of Blake's diary at its face value, and point significantly to certain facts such as the undoubted genuineness of the old church record, the verified existence of the disliked and unorthodox Starry Wisdom sect prior to 1877, the recorded disappearance of an inquisitive reporter named Edwin M. Lillibridge in 1893, and, above all, the look of monstrous, transfiguring fear on the face of the young writer when he died. Out of character. Wow, that was a really long sentence. Ah, Lovecraft, please. It was one of these believers who, moved to fanatical extremes, threw into the bay the curiously angled stone and its strangely adorned metal box found in the old church steeple. The black windowless steeple, and not the tower where Blake's diary and those things originally were. Though widely censored both officially and unofficially, this man, a reputable physician with a taste for odd folklore, averred that he had rid the earth of something too dangerous to rest upon it. There's footnotes in here too. Let me just double check about the footnotes. Footnotes. I'm used to the more modern footnotes where they are much closer to the, well, they're written at the bottom of the page that they're referenced to, and not a case of having to jump all the way to the back to the explanatory notes per story. Who's the editor for this? Like, is there even? There has to be someone who decided. Oh, okay, it's an SD Joshi. No wonder. Okay. With the run-ons, yeah, every word counts. Every word is another penny. Or half penny? Or is it called a halfpenny? It's called a halfpenny, right? That always bothered me when I was reading, I suppose, certain older pieces where they talked about shillings and farthings and guineas and stuff, and I did not know what the math was for that. And I thought it was pronounced halfpenny, I guess. Or halfpenny. Not halfpenny. I don't know if that's going to come up in here. That's probably something that would be. There was something about it being a footnote in one book. Okay. Between these two schools of opinion, the reader must judge for himself. The papers have given the tangible details from a skeptical angle, leaving for others the drawing of the picture as Robert Blake saw it, or thought he saw it, or pretended to see it. Now, studying the diary closely, dispassionately, and at leisure, let us summarize the dark chain of events from the expressed point of view of their chief actor. Right? Halfpenny, hey penny. It looks like halfpenny. It looks like halfpenny. Young Blake returned to the Providence in the winter of 1934-35, taking the upper floor of a venerable dwelling in a grassy court off College Street, on the crest of the great Eastwood Hill near the Brown University campus and behind the marble John Hay Library. It was a cozy and fascinating place, and a little garden oasis of village-like antiquity where huge, friendly cats sunned themselves atop a convenient shed. The square Georgian house had a monitor roof, classic doorway with fan carving, small paned windows, and all the other earmarks of early 19th century workmanship. Inside were 6-paneled doors, wide floorboards, a curving colonial staircase, white Adam period mantels, and a rear set of rooms 3 steps below the general level. Blade's study, a large southwest chamber, overlooked the front garden on one side, while its west windows, before one of which he had his desk, faced off from the brow of the hill and commanded a splendid view of the lower town's outspread roofs and the mystical sunsets that flamed behind him. Them. On the far horizon were the open countryside's purple slopes. Against these, some 2 miles away, rose the spectral hump of Federal Hill, bristling with huddled roofs and steeples whose remote outlines wavered mysteriously, taking fantastical forms as the smoke of the city swirled up and enmeshed them. Blake had a curious sense of what he was looking upon, some unknown ethereal world which might or might not vanish in a dream if he ever tried to seek it out and enter it in person. They still use the term shilling for 25-cent coins there? And what? Quid has basically evolved to be $1, right? Like, or rather a pound. Although there's also the question of like bob notes and stuff. There, I definitely, it was in Good Omens, the book, I believe, where they had an entire large footnote denoting how to exchange money back in those days. How to put it? You think like inches to feet is bad to yards to miles. the, I want to say at least the American money system is fairly simple, I guess, except for the fact that you have quarters and dimes and five, well, like 5 cents. But it still didn't feel quite as weird as the other one. But I have to admit, uh, tablespoons to cups to pints to quarts bothers me still to this day. If you tell me I need to put 6 tablespoons of something uh, into this recipe, I need to take out the tablespoons. You do not understand yards in the slightest. A yard is 3 feet. So a person, well, I want to say, uh, I guess a man would be usually 2 yards tall. A woman would probably be more like 2.5 and a bit. Let's see. It would be more than 2.5. 2 3/4, I suppose. Yeah, 2 3/4. No, 1 3/4. No, 1 2/4. 1 2/4 for a woman, and about 2 yards for a man. You only have two? 2 yards? Or 2 feet? You only have 2 feet. And I suppose, depending on where you live, you might be lucky to have 1 yard or two, or potentially more. And I guess it also depends on division of yard. Okay. These are such long, long sentences. Having sent home for most of his books, Blake bought some antique furniture suitable to his quarters and settled down to write and paint, living alone and attending to the simple housework himself. His studio was in a north attic room, where the panes of the monitor roof furnished admirable lighting. During that first winter, he produced 5 of his best-known short stories: The Burrower Beneath, The Stairs in the Crypt, Shagai, In the Vale of Pnoth, and The Feaster from the Stars, and painted 7 canvases, studies of nameless, unhuman monsters and profoundly alien, non-terrestrial landscapes. At sunset, he would often sit at his desk and gaze dreamily at the outspread west, the dark towers of a memorial hall just below, the Georgian courthouse belfry, and lofty pinnacles of the downtown section, and that shimmering spire-crowned mound in the distance whose unknown streets and labyrinthine gables so potently provoked his fancy. From his few local acquaintances, he learned that the far-off slope was a vast Italian quarter, though most of the houses were remnants of older Yankee and Irish days. Now and then he would train his field glasses on that spectral, unreachable world beyond the curling smoke, picking out individual roofs and chimneys and steeples, and speculating upon the bizarre and curious mysteries they might house. Even with optical aid, Federal Hill seemed somehow alien, half fabulous, and half linked to the unreal, intangible marvels of Blake's own tales and pictures. The feeling would persist long after the hill had faded into the violet, lamp-starred twilight, and the courthouse floodlights and the red Industrial Trust beacon had blazed up to make the night grotesque. Foot and front foot, you say that, but at the same time, footedness is footedness is not necessarily tied to handiness, right? Just thinking. And might it also depend on what you're doing with your feet as well? Like if you were to kick a ball, would you kick it with your left, what is your left foot and what is your right foot? Which one's the front foot? Which one's the back foot? And there are other sports that have probably, I guess a lot of it would be tied to your your arm movement, like bowling. For instance, your front foot would be, if you're right-handed with a bowling ball, your left foot. Soccer, someone who is like kicking with the right foot, that's the more standard one, right? You're goofy-footed from surfing. Oh, surfing scares me so much, like the concept of it. And I guess it makes sense too that there's a footedness there. So, like, what is the normal footing position for a surfer? Is it left foot front and right foot back? Like, what is considered goofy footed for surfing? What? For instance, I'm mostly left handed for certain things, but, well, actually, I should probably say the opposite. I'm mostly right handed, I suppose, except for writing and drawing. And it feels weird to call calligraphy writing again, but for calligraphy as well, I'm left handed. So, and for, I guess, cutting things and scissors, but for most sports, I am right handed, which I think throws a lot of things off. And then there's questions of, like, so which hand do you use with your mouse? And, well, that's right handed too. But in a way, it makes things much easier because then I can do something with my left and my right. But there's also people who've trained themselves uh, to do either which way. So it doesn't feel that special after all. Okay. Left foot forward is normal. Okay, so I think in that case, for instance, I would also, if I ever surf, which I am never going to surf, I would probably be normal for surfing. Of all the distant objects on Federal Hill, a certain huge dark church most fascinated Blake. It stood out with a special distinctness at certain hours of the day, and at sunset the great tower and its tapering steeple loomed blackly against the flaming sky. It seemed to rest on especially high ground, the grimy facade, and the obliquely seen north side with sloping roofs and tops of great pointed windows rose boldly above the tangle of surrounding ridgepoles and chimney pots. Peculiarly grim and austere, it appeared to be built of stone, stained and weathered with smoke and storms of a century and more. The style, as far as the glass could shew, was that of earliest experimental form of Gothic revival, which preceded the stately Upjohn period and held some of the outlines and proportions of the Georgian age. Perhaps was reared around 1810 or 1850. Left-handed mice are easy to find? Yes, but I think it's more so if you ever shared a computer with someone else, it would always be a bother to have to move things over to the left side. So I think it was more so just eventually giving up and just letting it stay on the right side and moving to be a right-handed mouse person. And in that vein, I think it also feels a little awkward because mm, I think I've kind of gotten stuck a bit in the imagery of the left click being the primary click, you know? Although thinking about phone treatment too, I'm left-handed when I use my phone, I think. Like when you put your phone in a pocket, would it be your left pocket or your right pocket? When you hold it in your hand and you're just moving around to different apps, are you doing it with your left hand or your right hand? In my case, it would be left. But I suppose that's one of the nice things about it all. Just, I don't really have to worry. Though there are some nice applications that do have a bit of a handedness bit on them, or the ability to move buttons around on their own. Being able to place the button where you would like is really great as a left-handed person. But yeah, I think my Mahjong app, for instance, has a left-handedness mode, which moves some things around to make it a little easier when you're one-handed playing. Because it's such a small phone. Well, I mean, it is a small phone, but it's actually quite a large phone as well. It's not one of the huge iPhones that I have, but still, like if I'm holding it in the crook, I can't reach all the way across with my thumb. So in that case, it's a large phone. I feel like they used to be smaller. As months passed, Blake watched the far-off forbidding structure with an oddly mounting interest. Since the vast windows were never lighted, he knew it must be vacant. The longer he watched, the more his imagination worked, till at length he began to fancy such curious things. He believed that a vague, singular aura of desolation hovered over the place, so that even the pigeons and swallows shunned its smoky eaves. Around other towers and belfries, his glass would reveal great flocks of birds, but here they never rested. At least, that is what he thought and set down in his diary. He pointed the place out to several friends, but none of them had even been on Federal Hill or possessed the faintest notion of what the church was or had been. In the spring, a deep restlessness gripped Blake. He had begun his long-planned novel, based on a supposedly survival of a witch cult in Maine, but was strangely unable to make progress with it. More and more he would sit at his westward window and gaze at the distant hill and the black, frowning steeple shunned by the birds. When the delicate leaves came out of the garden boughs, the world was filled with a new beauty, but Blake's restlessness was merely increased. It was then that he first thought of crossing the city and climbing bodily up that fabulous slope into the smoke-wreathed world of Dream. I might have small hands. I know I have small wrists. Actually, I think I do have small hands. Or rather, like, how to put it? I think so. Like, comparing them against some other people who I've put my hands up against. Even people, I want to say, I'm not the shortest, I'm not the tallest, but I feel like most people I meet are taller than me. And I think, therefore, also generally have bigger hands. And the only person I can distinctly think of right now who's smaller than me would be my mother. And, well, it has other issues. She has smaller hands than I do. But that's what happens when you age a little bit. Late in April, just before the aeon-shadowed Walpurgis time, Blake made his first trip into the unknown. Plodding through the endless downtown streets and the bleak, decayed squares beyond, he came finally upon the ascending avenue of century-worn steps, sagging Doric perches, and blear-paned cupolas, which he felt must lead up to the long-known, unreachable world beyond the mists. There were dingy blue and white street signs which meant nothing to him, and presently he noted the strange, dark faces of the drifting crowds and the foreign signs over curious shops in brown, decade-weathered buildings. Nowhere he could find any of the subjects he had seen from afar, so that once more he half fancied that the Federal Hill of that distant view was a dream world never to be trod by living human feet. Now and then a battered church facade or a crumbling spire came in sight, but never the blackened pile that he sought. When he asked a shopkeeper about a great stone church, the man smiled and shook his head, though he spoke English freely. As Blake climbed higher, the region seemed stranger and stranger, with bewildering mazes of brooding brown alleys leading eternally off to the south. He crossed 2 or 3 broad avenues, and once he thought he glimpsed a familiar tower. Again, he asked a merchant about the massive church of stone, and this time he could have sworn that the plea of ignorance was feigned. The dark man's face had a look of fear which he tried to hide, and Blake saw him make a curious sign with his right hand. Then suddenly a black spire stood out against the cloudy sky on his left. Above the tiers of brown roofs lining the tangled southerly alleys. Blake knew at once what it was, and plunged toward it through the squalid, unpaved lanes that climbed from the avenue. Twice he lost his way, but he somehow dared not ask any of the patriarchs or housewives who sat on the doorsteps, or any of the children who shouted and played in the mud of the shadowy lanes. At last he saw the tower plain against the southwest, and a huge stone bulk rose darkly at the end of an alley. Presently he stood in a windswept open square, quaintly cobblestoned, with a high bank wall on the farther side. This was the end of his quest, for upon the wide, iron-railed, weed-grown plateau which the wall supported, a separate, lesser world raised fully 6 feet above the surrounding streets, there stood a grim, titan bulk whose identity, despite Blake's new perspective, was beyond dispute. The vacant church was in a state of great decrepitude. Some of the high stone buttresses had fallen, and several delicate finials lay half lost among the brown, neglected weeds and grasses. The sooty Gothic windows were largely unbroken, though many of the stone mullions were missing. Blake wondered how the obscurely painted panes could have survived so well, in view of the known habits of small boys the world over. The massive doors were intact and tightly closed. Around the top of the bank wall, fully enclosing the grounds, was a rusty iron fence whose gate, at the head of a flight of steps from the square, was visibly padlocked. The path from the gate to the building was completely overgrown. Desolation and decay hung like a pall above the place, and in the birdless eaves and black, ivyless walls, Blake felt a touch of the dimly sinister beyond his power to define. There were very few people in the square, but Blake saw a policeman at the northerly end and approached him with questions about the church. He was a great, wholesome Irishman, and it seemed odd that he would do a little more than make the sign of the cross and mutter that people never spoke of that building. When Blake pressed him, he said very hurriedly that the Italian priests warned everybody against it, vowing that a monstrous evil had once dwelt there and left its mark. He himself had heard dark whispers of it from his father, who recalled certain sounds and rumors from his boyhood. There had been a bad sect there in the old days, an outlaw sect that called up awful things from some unknown gulf of night. It had taken a good priest to exorcise what had come, though there did be those who said merely the light could do it. If Father O'Malley were alive, there would be many the thing he could tell. But now there was nothing to do but to let it alone. It hurt nobody now, and those that owned it were dead or far away. They had run away like rats after the threatening talk in 77, where people began to mind the way folks vanished now and then in the neighborhood. Some say the city would step in and take the property for lack of heirs, but little good would come of anybody's touching it. Better it be left alone for the years to topple, lest things be stirred that ought to rest forever in their black abyss. After the policeman had gone, Blake stood staring at the sullen, steepled pile. It excited him to find that the structure seemed as sinister to others as to him, and he wondered what grain of truth might lie beyond the old tales the blue coat had repeated. Probably they were mere legends evoked by the evil look of the place, but even so, they were like a strange coming to life of one of his own stories. Okay, quick drink. Okay. Okay. I do have to wonder sometimes what the best position for reading this is. I feel like I'm going to eventually go cross-eyed. Reading it kind of through the pop filter here. Or are they like looking in one place and speaking towards another? Are people meant to be that crossed? Maybe this will be better. Okay. Shifting to the other side. No longer wrapped around the cabinet. Okay. Actually, maybe in the future. Maybe in the future I'll do something a little different. Let's see. The afternoon sun had come out from behind dispersing clouds, but it seemed unable to light up the stained city walls of the old temple that towered on its high plateau. It was odd that the green of spring had not touched the brown, withered growths in the raised, iron-fenced yard. Blake found himself edging nearer the raised area and examining the bank wall and rusted fence for possible avenues of ingress. There was a terrible lure about the blackened fane which was not to be resisted. Thank you for the head pat. Sorry, it's a little, a little low, a little high, a little low. I lost my place. I looked away. I lost my place. How far? Okay. Let's see. I think I found it. The fence had no opening near the steps, but around on the north side were some missing bars. He could go up the steps and walk around on the narrow coping outside the fence till he came to the gap. If the people feared the place so wildly, he would encounter no interference. He was on the embankment and almost inside the fence before anyone noticed him. Then, looking down, he saw the few people in the square edging away and making the same sign with their right hands that the shopkeeper in the avenue had made. Several windows were slammed down, and a fat woman darted into the street and pulled up some children inside a rickety, unpainted house. As long as it's my head, it's okay. Yeah. Thankfully, it's not lower. Or in the eyes. The eyes would be bad. The ears would be fine. The eyes would be bad. The gap in the fence was very easy to pass through, and before long Blake found himself waiting amidst the rotting, tangled growths of the deserted yard. Here and there the worn stump of a headstone told him that there had once been burials in this field, but that, he saw, must have been a very long time ago. The sheer bulk of the church was oppressive now that he was close to it. He conquered his mood and approached to try the 3 great doors in the facade. All were securely locked, so he began a circuit of the cyclopean building in quest of some minor and more penetrable opening. Even then, he could not be sure that he wished to enter the haunt of desertion and shadow, yet the pull of its strangeness dragged him on automatically. A yawning and unprotected cellar window in the rear furnished the needed aperture. Peering in, Blake saw a subterranean gulf of cobwebs and dust faintly litten by the western sun's filtered rays. Debris, old barrels, and ruined boxes and furniture of numerous sorts met his eye. And though over everything lay a shroud of dust which softened all sharp outlines. The rusted remains of a hot air furnace showed that the building had been used and kept in shape as late as mid-Victorian times. Acting almost without conscious initiative, Blake crawled through the window and let himself down to the dust-carpeted and debris-strewn concrete floor. The vaulted cellar was a vast one, without partitions, and in a corner far to the right, amid dense shadows, he saw a black archway evidently leading upstairs. He felt a peculiar sense of oppression at being actually within the great spectral building. But he kept it in cheek as he cautiously scouted about, finding a still intact barrel amid the dust, and rolling it over to the open window to provide for his exit. Then, bracing himself, he crossed the wide, cobweb-festooned space toward the arch. Half choked with the omnipresent dust and covered with ghostly gossamer fibers, he reached and began to climb the worn stone steps which rose into the darkness. He had no light, but groped carefully with his hands. After a sharp turn, he felt a closed door ahead, and a little fumbling revealed its ancient latch. It opened inward, and beyond it he saw a dimly illuminated corridor lined with worm-eaten paneling. Once on the ground floor, Blake began exploring in a rapid fashion. All the inner floors were unlocked, so that he could freely pass from room to room. The colossal nave was almost eldritch in place. The colossal nave was an almost eldritch place with its drifts and mountains of dust over box pews, altar, hourglass pulpit, and sounding board, and its titanic ropes of cobweb stretching among the pointed arches of the gallery and entwined the clustered Gothic columns. Over all this hushed desolation played a hideous leaden light at the declining afternoon sun sent its rays through the strange, half-blackened panes of the great apsidal windows. I'm actually going to take like a very, very quick break to get another drink because I think this is getting to my voice. So I will be back. And I'm going to put up just a little bit of music during the be right back as well. Sorry to interrupt mid-story, but just it's getting to me. I'm flubbing more words. I need to down an entire glass of water. So I'll be right back. Whispering into a mic that's turned off. Whispering into a mic that's mostly turned off. Should be back now. Good evening to you too, Remove. It is getting darker. Actually, I wonder, does it count as the sun having set yet? I haven't checked. Probably not. Probably not. So it's always a bit off-putting when there's daylight savings. Remembering which way it pushes and pulls. I got my drink. Hello, Kabbalah. Let me put this back. Oh, wait, that's not the right thing. What did I just move? What did I just move? Okay, this one hopefully is it. Yeah, this is it. Okay. See where that pat's next time. Thank you for that. I'm going to check that really quick. Where am I patting right now? I head pat myself. Where am I patting? Okay, it's a little better. It's just a little better. So I left off in the middle of The Haunter of the Dark. Let's see. We are about, it started at 3:36. We're only at like 3:44, so not quite 10 pages in. Adding myself? I mean, how else am I going to check where the hands is? I've also had to water myself. I used Trigger Fire to set it up, and it took me a little bit of, probably a bit more testing than a normal person to get it to work. And also figuring out transition and such. It's a learning process, though. And it's, I want to say, not the most technically difficult thing that I've done recently. But then again, for someone who doesn't even know if they need to clean or refill their hydro-powered cooler or other hydro cooling system for their computer, maybe not the best person to ask. Okay, where were we? We were talking about the great apsidal windows. The black paintings on those windows are so obscured by soot that Blake could scarcely decipher what they had represented, but from the little he could make out, he did not like them. The designs were largely conventional, and his knowledge of obscure symbolism told him much concerning some of the ancient patterns. The few saints depicted bore expressions of distinctly open to criticism, while one of the windows seemed to shew merely a dark space with spirals of curious luminosities scattered about in it. Turning away from the windows, Blake noticed that the cobwebbed cross above the altar was not of the ordinary kind, but resembled the primordial Ankh or crux ansata of the shadowy Egypt. In a rear vestry room beside the apse, Blake found a rotting desk and ceiling-high shelves of mildew-disintegrating books. Here, for the first time, he received a positive shock of objective horror, for the titles of those books told him much. They were the black, forbidden things which most sane people have never even heard of, or have heard of only in furtive, timorous whispers, the banned and dreaded repositories of equivocal secrets and immemorial formulae which have trickled down the stream of time from the days of man's youth and the dim, fabulous days before man was. He had himself read many of them. A Latin version of the abhorred Necronomicon, the sinister Liber Evonis, the infamous Cultus de Schools of Comte d'Erlet, the Onospreklichen Kulten of von Just, an old Ludwig Prinz, hellish de vermis mysteris. But there were others he had known merely by reputation or not at all. The Narcotic Manuscript, the Book of Xian, and a crumbling volume in wholly unidentifiable characters, yet with certain symbols and diagrams shudderingly recognizable to the occult student. Clearly, the lingering local rumors had not lied. This place had once been the seat of an evil older than mankind and wider than the known universe. In the ruined desk was a small leather-bound record book filled with entries in some odd cryptographic medium. The manuscript writing consisted of the common traditional symbols used today in astronomy and anciently in alchemy, astrology, and other dubious arts. The devices of the sun, moon, planets, aspects, and zodiacal signs, here amassed in solid pages of text, with divisions and paragraphing suggesting that each symbol answered to some alphabetical letter. In the hope of later solving the cryptogram, Blake bore off this volume in his coat pocket. Many of the great tomes on the shelves fascinated him unutterably, and he felt tempted to borrow them at some later time. He wondered how they could have remained undisturbed for so long. Was he the first to conquer the clutching, pervasive fear which had nearly for 60 years protected this deserted place from visitors? Having now thoroughly explored the ground floor, Blake plowed again through the dust of the spectral nave to the front vestibule, where he had seen a door and staircase presumably leading up to the blackened tower and steeple, objects so long familiar to him at a distance. The ascent was a choking experience, for dust lay thick, while the spiders had done their worst in this constricted place. The staircase was a spiral with high, narrow wooden treads, and now and then Blake passed a clouded window looking dizzily out over the city. Though he had seen no ropes below, he expected to find a bell or peal of bells in the tower, whose narrow, louver-boarded lancet windows his field glass had studied so often. Here he was doomed to disappointment, for when he attained the top of the stairs, he found the tower chamber vacant of chimes, and clearly devoted to vastly different purposes. The room, about 15 feet square, was faintly lighted by 4 lancet windows, one on each side, which were glazed within their screening of decayed louver boards. These had been further fitted with tight, opaque screens, but the latter were now largely rotted away. In the center of the dust-laden floors rose a curiously angled stone pillar, some 4 feet in height and 2 in average diameter, covered on each side with bizarre, crudely incised, and wholly unrecognizable hieroglyphs. On this pillar rested a metal box of peculiarly asymmetrical form, its hinged lid thrown back, and its interior holding what looked beneath the decade-deep dust to be an egg-shaped or irregularly spherical object some 4 inches through. Around the pillar in a rough circle were 7 high-backed Gothic chairs still largely intact, while behind them, raging along the dark-paneled walls, were 7 colossal images of crumbling, black-painted plaster, resembling more than anything else the cryptic carven megaliths of mysterious Easter Island. In one corner of the cobwebbed chamber, a ladder was built into the wall, leading up to the closed trapdoor of the windowless steeple above. Can I stop for a drink? I feel like it's drier when you read a physical book. Maybe it's just because I have my fingers on the paper. You probably can't hear it if I start like flipping through. But yeah, it's a soft cover and it's yellowing and dry itself. As Blake grew accustomed to the feeble light, he noticed odd bas reliefs on the strange open box of yellowish metal. Approaching, he tried to clear the dust away with his hands and handkerchief, and saw that the figurines were of a monstrous and utterly alien kind, depicting entities which, though seemingly alive, resembled no known life form ever evolved on this planet. The 4-inch seeming sphere turned out to be a nearly black, red striated polyhedron with many irregular flat surfaces, either a very remarkable crystal of some sort, or an artificial object of carved and highly polished mineral matter. It did not touch the bottom of the box, but was held suspended by means of a metal band around its center, with 7 queerly designed supports extending horizontally to edges of the box's inner wall near the top. The stone, once exposed, exerted upon Blake an almost alarming fascination. Hello, Custom Elvis. He could scarcely tear his eyes from it, and as he looked at its glistening surfaces, he almost fancied it was transparent, with half-formed worlds of wonder within. Into his mind floated pictures of alien orbs with the great stone towers, and other orbs with Titan mountains and no mark of life, and still remoter spaces where only a stirring and vague blacknesses told of the presence of consciousness and will. A hard or soft cover? I suppose it depends for the purpose and also how big the book is. For instance, I have a very, very, very large hardcover, and it is beautiful. It is gorgeous. It is signed by the author, except it's literally 16 light novels combined into one book. It is too monstrous to actually read, I feel like. But soft covers don't last very long, but that's sort of the point of the soft cover, isn't it? They're much more disposable. They're cheaper to produce. So, I suppose if it's to look fancy, it's a hardcover. If it's to read quickly and travel with, paperback. So yeah, I suppose that would be my answer. Thinking about it though, I think a lot of the books that, hit the pop filter. I think a lot of the books that I have and reread a lot are paperbacks, but they're also the most damage. I've definitely had my cats maybe leave their own mark on the paperbacks, and also thinking about another paperback I have, the Gift one, the one I can't read from because every single short story in there is 100 pages. It is, how to put it? Like, you feel like that you can read, or writing in books is generally not something that people do, right? Like, it feels crude to write in them. I've been, ever since I got a gift, that, a book that hadn't already been written in, it was written in specifically for me. It was a gift. It was actually quite touching to receive that. Thinking about it. And ever since then, and a few other instances, it's kind of been a case of, if I really like the book, I'm keeping it until I die, likely. So why shouldn't I write in something, especially if it's a case of a recipe book where I want to refer to it again, use it again, because I like it. So, for instance, baking. I have a book that's all about making cakes. And I don't bake often, but when I do, I use one of those recipes. And there is a beautiful recipe in there for rum cake. The problem is looking at the recipe, what it produces, the picture, and then looking at what it calls for. The first time I made it, it did not look like the picture. It called for 3 tablespoons of white powdered sugar on top of the rum cake. The picture that it showed was more like maybe a tablespoon at the very most. It was probably more like a teaspoon sprinkled upon that cake. It's very obvious, the difference. So, writing in the margin of the book to let myself know in the future that this picture is wrong. If I want something that looks like this picture, I should use a smaller amount. Because otherwise, next time I make that recipe, I might not recall the error from, not error, but the issues I had the first time. And the same thing with other baked goods, making notes to make these changes or that change, or it is in fact fine to replace this with that because no one's going to be able to tell the difference between beet sugar and cane sugar, for instance. But yes. And there's also cases like my 16 novels in one book where it's already signed by the author. So should there really be a problem with writing more in it? It's already been written in once, technically. No one else is going to have that book but me. Thank you for the compliments on my voice. And I am doing fairly well. Enjoying the rereading. I've only managed to make it through 1.5 stories, though, if you can even call this a half so far with The Haunter in the Dark. Otherwise, all I've read has been The Yellow Wallpaper. Just thinking. I guess for fiction books, though, I don't have a whole lot of writing in them. Just the one, mostly. But part of that might also be the case of reading books that are not mine. Certainly do not want to get, well, certainly don't want to write in those. Not if they're meant to be returned. Mm. Mm. And I actually very much enjoy audiobooks too. That's how I've listened to some of the Witcher stories. And also how I listen to Kizumonogatari. Although it's weird to call that one an audiobook. I guess it's an audio drama. Thank you for the follow, Custom Elvis. Okay, let's see. I was looking at this. Sorry, I'm trying to find my place in the book again. I really need to have a proper bookmark for this. Like, they must make. Do they make bookmarks where there's a little hole or something so you can mark off what line you're last on? It might be a little difficult to, if you're like setting down the book and if the bookmark moves inside of it for short stints like this. And when he did look away, it was to notice a somewhat singular mound of dust in the far corner near their ladder to the steeple. Just why it took his attention, he could not tell, but something in its contours carried a message to his unconscious mind. Plowing toward it and brushing aside the hanging cobwebs as he went, he began to discern something grim about it. Hands and handkerchief soon revealed the truth, and Blake gasped with a baffling mixture of emotions. It was a human skeleton, and it must have been there for a very long time. The clothing was in shreds, but some buttons and fragments of cloth bespoke a man's gray suit. There were other bits of evidence: shoes, metal clasps, huge buttons for round cuffs, a stick pin of bygone pattern, a reporter's badge with the name of the old Providence Telegram, and a crumbling leather pocketbook. Blake examined the latter with care, finding within it several bills of antiquated issue, a celluloid advertising calendar for 1893, some cards with the name Edwin M. Lillibridge, and a paper covered with penciled memoranda. This paper held much of a puzzling nature, and Blake read it carefully at the dim westward window. Its disjointed text included such phrases as the following: Prof. Enoch Bowen, home from Egypt, May 1844. Buys Old Free Will Church in July. His archaeological work and studies in occult well known. Dr. Drown of Fourth Baptist warns against sorry wisdom with sermon, December 29, 1844. Congregation 97 by end of 45. 1846. 3 disappearances. First mention of shining trapezoidhedron. 7 disappearances, 1848. Stories of blood sacrifice begin. Investigation 1853 comes to nothing. Stories of sounds. Okay, here's one that I don't know out of character. Is it FR is for father or FR is for friar? It's probably father, I'm guessing, based on context from earlier. There's a lot of shorthand in this particular section. Father O'Malley tells of devil worship with box found in great Egyptian ruins. Says they call up something that can't exist in light, flees a little light, and banished by strong light. Then has to be summoned again. Probably got this from deathbed confession of Francis X. Feeney, who had joined Starry Wisdom in 49. These people say the shining trapezohedron shews them heaven and other worlds, and that the haunter of the dark tells them secrets in some way. Story of Orrin B. Eddy, 1857. They call it up by gazing at the crystal and have a secret language of their own. 200 or more in congregation, 1863, exclusive of men at front. Irish boys mob church in 1869 after Patrick Regan's disappearance. Veiled article in January-March 1472, but people don't talk about it. 6 disappearances, 1876. Secret committee calls on Mayor Doyle. Action promised, February 1877, sorry. Church closes in April. Gang, Federal Hill Boys, threaten doctor and vestrymen in May. Oop. Sorry, sounds like there's some trouble outside. But this should be done now. Should be done. Oh. Thank you. Though there's a double E in your name, you know that, right? We love you. Mm-hmm. 181 persons leave city before end of 77. Mention no names. Starting trouble outside. Someone's starting trouble outside. Someone is starting trouble outside. Somewhere nearby. Thank you for the follow. We love you. Just a question of like, double E, long E, double E, short E. I'm going to call it by a long E for now. Ghost stories began around 1880. Try to ascertain truth of report that no human being has entered church since 1877. Ask Lanigan for photograph of place taken 1851. Yes, there's just some noises outside. What's the phrase? Alarms, but it's fine. It has passed. Sometimes there are loud noises outside. Usually they're not too troublesome. But in the case of this particular microphone setting, I'm a little worried that it might actually be audible. And there have definitely been times when I've had window open and someone makes a particularly loud noise outside that can be heard. And then there was the one time late at night that I heard a very close sound outside, and I could not tell where exactly it came from. In my current home, what's the phrase? It's a very large home, and normally if something happens in a different room far enough away, I can't hear it. But this sound I very clearly heard. I thought it was perhaps someone attempting to open a door or window something downstairs, so that was very scary. Though it turned out to be nothing at all. Nothing at all, as far as I could tell. But now it is not late, so now there's nothing to worry about. There's still a little bit of daylight to see outside. Mm. Mm. Just a little spooky. Just a little spooky. Restoring the paper to the pocketbook and placing the latter in his coat, Blake turned to look down at the skeleton in the dust. The implications of the notes were clear, and there could be no doubt but that this man had come to the deserted edifice 42 years before in his quest of a newspaper sensation which no one else had been bold enough to attempt. Perhaps no one else had known of his plan. Who could tell? But he had never returned to his paper. Had some bravely suppressed fear risen to overcome him and bring on sudden heart failure? Blake stooped over the gleaming bones and noted their peculiar state. Some of them were badly scattered, and a few seemed oddly dissolved at the ends. Others were strangely yellowed, with vague suggestions of charring. This charring extended to some of the fragments of clothing. The skull was in a very peculiar state, stained yellow, and with a charred aperture in the top, as if some powerful acid had eaten through the solid bone. What had happened to the skeleton during its 4 decades of silent entombment here, Blake could not imagine. Thank you. I will try to stay safe where I am. I don't think it's that bad where I live. I'm just not used to the sounds. Every house has its own sounds. Every neighborhood has its own sounds. For instance, it hasn't started yet exactly, but I'm almost nostalgic now for waiting for the sound of the distant tuba on summer or on warm but not oppressively warm nights now. How many other people have mariachi bands playing outside? What's the word? I don't say visible, but like hearable from your house? Audible from your house, from your home. But it certainly does make it a little bit more difficult when you're recording. Just distant sounds of tuba interfering. When you're not recording, it's not bad. Before he realized it, he was looking at the stone again and letting its curious influence call up a nebulous pageantry in his mind. He saw processions of robed, hooded figures whose outlines were not human, and looked on endless leagues of desert lined with carved, sky-reaching monoliths. He saw towers and walls in nighted depths under the sea, and vortices of space where wisps of black mist floated before thin shimmerings of gold-purple haze. Old houses, and I want to say my house is not particularly old by some standards, but to others it would be. It's over 100 years at this stage. I don't think it's quite as creaky as some other houses I've been that have been younger, though. And beyond all else, he glimpsed an infinite gulf of darkness, where solid and semi-solid forms were known only by their windy stirrings, and cloudy patterns of force seemed to superimpose order on chaos and hold forth a key to all the paradoxes and arcana of the worlds we know. Then all at once the spell was broken by an access of gnawing, indeterminate panic fear. Blaine choked and turned away from the stone, conscious of some formless alien presence close to him and watching him with horrible intentness. He felt entangled with something which was not in the stone, but which had looked through it at him. Something which would ceaselessly follow him with a cognition that was not physical sight. Plainly, the place was getting on his nerves, as well it might in view of this gruesome find. The lighting was waning, too. Since he had no illuminant with him, he knew he would have to be leaving soon. 100 years, yes. 100 years. Again, not the oldest that could be here, but it's got good bones to it. It's got good bones. It was then, in the gathering twilight, that he thought he saw a faint trace of luminosity in the crazily angled stone. He had tried to look away from it, but some obscure compulsion drew his eyes back. Was there a subtle phosphorescence of radioactivity through the thing? What was it that the dead man's notes had said concerning the shining trapezohedron? What, anyway, was this abandoned layer of cosmic evil? What had been done here, and what might still be lurking in the bird-shunned windows? It seemed now as if an elusive touch of fetor had arisen somewhere close by, though its source was not apparent. Blake seized the cover of the long open box and snapped it down. It moved easily on its alien hinges and closed completely over the unmistakably glowing stone. At the sharp click of that closing, a soft, stirring sound seemed to come from the steeple's eternal blackness overhead, beyond the trapdoor. Rats, without question, the only living things to reveal their presence in this accursed pile since he had entered it. And yet that stirring in the steeple frightened him horribly, so that he plunged almost wildly down the spiral stairs, across the ghoulish nave, into the vaulted basement, out amidst the gathering dusk of the deserted square, and down through the teeming, fear-haunted alleys and avenues of Federal Hill toward the sane central streets and the home-like brick sidewalks of the college district. During the days which followed, Blake told no one of his expedition. Sorry, that was that really sucks. They really need to change that sort of thing. Like two syllables of one word on its own line. Just maybe a little bit more tracking work, kerning work could have fixed that. Teeny tiny bit of tracking, kerning. Instead, he read much in certain books, examined long years of newspaper files downtown, and worked feverishly at the cryptogram in that leather volume from the cobwebbed vestry room. The cipher, he soon saw, was no simple one, and after a long period of endeavor, he felt sure that its language could not be English, Latin, Greek, French, Spanish, Italian, or German. Evidently, he would have to draw upon the deepest wells of his strange erudition. Every evening the old impulse to gaze westward returned, and he saw the black steeple as of yore amongst the bristling roofs of a distant and half-fabulous world. But now it held a fresh note of terror for him. He knew the heritage of evil lore it masked, and with the knowledge his vision ran riot in queer new ways. The birds of spring were returning, and as he watched their sunset flights, he fancied they avoided the gaunt, lone spire as never before. When a flock of them approached it, he thought, they would wheel and scatter in panic confusion, and he could guess at the wild twitterings which failed to reach him across the intervening miles. It was in June that Blake's diary told of his victory over the cryptogram. The text was, he found, in the dark Aklo language used by certain cults of evil antiquity, and known to him in a halting way through previous researches. The diary is strangely reticent about what Blake deciphered, but he was patently awed and disconcerted by his results. There are references to a haunter of the dark awakened by gazing into the shining trapezohedron, and insane conjectures about the black gulfs of chaos from which it was called. The being is spoken of as holding all knowledge and demanding monstrous sacrifices. Some of Blake's entries shew fear lest the thing, which he seemed to regard as summoned, stalk abroad, though he adds that the streetlights form a bulwark which cannot be crossed. Of the shining trapezohedron he speaks often, calling it a window on all time and space, and tracing its history from the day it was fashioned on Dark Yugoth, before ever the the old ones brought it to Earth. It was treasured and placed in its curious box by the crinoid things of Antarctica, salvaged from their ruins by the serpentmen of Volusia, and peered at aeons later in Lemuria by the first human beings. It crossed strange lands and stranger seas, and sank with Atlantis before a Minoan fisher meshed it in his net and sold it to swarthy merchants from Knighted Kem. The pharaoh Neferka built around it a temple with a windowless crypt, and did that which caused his name to be stricken from all monuments and records. Then it slept in the ruins of that evil fane which the priests and the new pharaoh destroyed, till the Delver's spade once more brought it forth to curse mankind. Hello. Ek. How do you drag out a C? Yeah. I'm trapezohedron. Trapezohedron. Next time it won't be a stutter. Early in July, the newspapers oddly supplement Blake's entries, though in so brief and casual a way that only the diary was called general attention to their contribution. It appears that a new fear has been growing on Federal Hill since a stranger had entered the dreaded church. The Italians whispered of it unaccustomed stirrings and bumpings and scrapings in the dark windowless steeple, and called on their priests to banish an entity which haunted their dreams. Something, they said, was constantly watching at a door to see if it were dark enough to venture forth. Press items mentioned the long-standing local superstitions, but failed to shed much light on the earlier background of the horror. It was obvious that the young reporters of today are no antiquarians. In writing of these things in his diary, Blake expresses a curious kind of remorse, and talks of the duty of burying the shining trapezohedron and of banishing what he had evoked by letting daylight into the hideous spire. At the same time, however, he displays the dangerous extent of his fascination and emits a morbid longing, pervading even his dreams, to visit the accursed tower and gaze again into the cosmic secrets of the glowing stone. Then something in the journal on the morning of July 17th threw the diarist into a veritable fever of horror. It was only a variant on the other half-humorous items about the Federal Hill restlessness, but to Blake it was somehow very terrible indeed. In the night, a thunderstorm had put the city's lighting system out of commission for a full hour. And in that black interval, the Italians had gone nearly mad with fright. Those living near the dreaded church had sworn that the thing in the steeple had taken advantage of the street lamp's absence and gone down into the body of the church, flopping and bumping around in a vicious, altogether dreadful way. Non-Euclidean geometry, how horrifying. Yeah, non-Euclidean geometry. Not quite yet. Toward the last, it had bumped up to the tower, where there were sounds of the shattering of glass. It could go wherever the darkness reached, but light would always send it fleeing. When the current blazed on again, there had been a shocking commotion in the tower, for even the feeble light trickling through the grime-blackened, louver-boarded windows was too much for the thing. It had bumped and slithered up into its tenebrous steeple just in time, for a long dose of light would have sent it back into the abyss whence the crazy stranger had called it. During the dark hour, praying crowds had clustered around the church in the rain with lighted candles and lamps somehow shielded with folded paper and umbrellas. A guard of light to save the city from the nightmare that stalks in darkness. Once, those nearest the church declared, the outer door had rattled hideously. But even this was not the worst. That evening in the bulletin, Blake had read what the reporters had found. Aroused at last to the whimsical news of the scare, a pair of them had defied the frantic crowds of Italians and crawled into the church through the cellar window after trying the doors in vain. They found the dust of the vestibule and of the spectral nave plowed up in a singular way, with pits of rotted cushions and satin pew linings scattered curiously around. There was a bad odor everywhere, and here and there were bits of yellow stain and patches of what looked like charring. Opening the door to the tower, and pausing a moment at the suspicion of a scraping sound above, they found the narrow spiral stairs wiped roughly clean. In the tower itself, a similarly half-swept condition existed. They spoke of the heptagonal stone pillar, the overturned Gothic chairs, and the bizarre plaster images. Though strangely enough, the metal box and the old mutilated skeleton were not mentioned. What disturbed Blaine the most? Blake the most? Except for the hints of stains and charring and bad odors, was the final detail that explained the crashing glass. Every one of the tower's lancet windows was broken, and two of them had been darkened in a crude and hurried way by the stuffing of satin pew linings and cushioned horsehair into the spaces between the slanting exterior louver boards. There is someone out crying outside the door again. He wants in. I have my own haunter of the dark, and he is making himself well known. Oh, I don't know if I can get the haunter to come up again. But the most I could probably do is to keep him quiet. He just flopped. He probably can't hear when he cries. He's happy with his toy for now, it seems. As long as I don't look at him. As long as I don't look at him. That's great, that's great. You can't hear the cat. I mean, it's kind of a shame that you can't hear him, but at the same time. Oh, he's angry. He is angry. I have a pixie toy for him in the background. I think it's a pixie. And he loves playing with it. Oh, nope. Not anymore. I made eye contact. I have lost. He just wants attention. I probably should actually just get like a little image to show when like I'm being bothered by this thing, by this creature. He's so interrupting. And before he was curled up in my arms, I had to do that to keep him quiet. He was right under the mic because otherwise he was on the desk and he was actually rubbing into the mic. And now he looks like he's going to try and do so again. Are you going to come up? Yes, you are. Okay, that's not your glass. This is not your microphone. Okay, maybe we can do the thing again. Maybe you can be in my arms and I can read. I unfortunately don't have a picture of this cat. I have a picture of a different cat, but she is not allowed in this room yet. Not for a very long time. She is the one scheduled for a tail amputation in the end of next week. Okay. Can I move the mic and keep him happy? And no, he just wants he wants the book. He's a very jealous cat, actually. He just, what's the phrase? Oh, since I have two other cats ish now. Ish. It's like 2.5. Oh. Okay. He has gotten very jealous if I show attention to the newest cat. So he might be feeling a bit left out. And oh god, he's gonna roll. He's gonna roll. Okay, can I do this? Can I wrap around him at the same time as hold the mic? Oh. 2.5. Yes, 2.5 cats. I adopted ish a community cat who I am taking care of. She needed medical attention. It turns out, actually, I found out a bit more from another neighbor of mine that she is a little older than we thought, and that she used to actually be an indoor cat. Her mother was, I guess, a stray or feral or something, and they took her in when she had kittens the first time, and this particular cat that I'm taking care of now was one of those kittens, and she's always been skittish of humans. So her brother was adopted out just fine. But she was not. So she has been living in the neighborhood since, but she... Oh, cat. I'm sorry about the loud noise. That was the cat. He didn't want anything else on the desk. Yes, she's not 100% human friendly yet, and uh, I don't know if she's going to want to stay inside, but she has to stay inside for. She's been inside for 2 months now, and she's probably the cat dropped a device onto the floor. Uh, but so the other cat has been inside for 2 months, and will probably be inside for another 2+ months after she gets her tail amputated. Not, I don't want to say by choice, but like it's either a case of the tail goes or the entirety of her will go because that tail is going to eventually kill her because of its wound. It has not gotten better in months and months and months. So, yeah, she has one last week of her. One last week. Yeah. I mean, it is like Bob's, I feel like often implies that it's natural, I feel like. Like, I could also say docking, but docking also implies that it's a cosmetic procedure. Amputated gives the appropriate feeling of it's a medical decision, which is what the reason is. It would be very nice if she could keep her tail, but it's been so long damaged that the healing is not really working. And when it does, it's because of the wound being all around the tail and it being such a deep wound at this stage. When it crusts over the scab, if it crusts all the way around, it actually starts killing the end of her tail because it's restricting blood flow down there. Docking, yes. It's much more of a thing in dogs, but you can crop ears and dock tails. For instance, I think Rottweilers and like what someone might describe as a pit bull, they may or may not dock the tail and crop the ears. I think cropping ears might be potentially a thing that you might medically do in the case of like it being very difficult to clean the ears, but it's not suggested, and most vets will not do it anymore for good reason. Again, mostly it's considered a medical, or not medical, cosmetic procedure. And docking, again, is mostly, a lot of people see it as a cosmetic procedure. It makes the dog look tougher. You can't tell if they're wagging their tail because there's so little of it. But I can also see docking potentially being a medical thing. I know of a few dogs that have wagged their tails so... Yeah. Wait, it's getting smashed from cows? Yeah, like that could be a medical reason to get it done. But I know people who had dogs with like long, spindly tails, I guess, and they wagged it so furiously they actually broke their tails against walls and stuff, leaving blood all over the wall as well. And I think if you break it too many times, it's just kind of it's a problem for the dog. So that might suggest like docking it to prevent further damage. Like you can't damage what's not there. Oh, he's crying so much. He's throwing a fit. He's throwing a fit. Also feels a little weird to say amputation because usually amputation is reserved for like I guess uh other digits that are more necessary to at least a human's perception, and people don't perceive tails as something necessary, do they? But in the case, like a cat, I actually don't know how much function a cat tail actually has. All the fits are blocked to us. Yeah. Well, not the biggest fit. If you were having a bigger fit, you'd be on the desk again, trying to knock everything down, balancing the body. Yeah. For cats. Oh, and probably for dogs. Uh, but yeah, it doesn't appear so harmful compared to like removing a paw or something like that, or an entire limb. Like, does a tail count as a limb? I'm not 100% certain. I suppose it wouldn't be, technically. Let's see. Where did I leave off? We. Okay. Finding where I left off. Oh, right. It was because of the cat. Because of the cat. More satin fragments and bunches of horsehair lay scattered around the newly swept floor, as if someone had been interrupted in the act of restoring the tower to absolute dark blackness of its tightly curtained days. Yellowish stains and charred patches were found on the ladder to the windowless spire, but when a reporter climbed up, opened the horizontally sliding trapdoor, and shot a feeble flashlight beam into the black and strangely fetid place, he saw nothing but darkness and a heterogeneous litter of shapeless fragments near the aperture. The verdict, of course, was Charlotte Chenry. Charlotte Chenry? Charlotte Chenry. Somebody had played a joke on the superstitious hill dwellers, or else some fanatic had strived to bolster up their fears for their own supposed good. Or perhaps some of the younger and more sophisticated dwellers had staged an elaborate hoax on the outside world. There was an amusing aftermath when the police sent an officer to verify their reports. 3 men in succession found ways of evading the assignment, and the 4th went very reluctantly and returned very soon without adding to the account given by the reporters. From this point onward, Blake's diary shews a mounting tide of insidious horror and nervous apprehension. He upbraids himself for not doing something, and speculates wildly on the consequences of another electrical breakdown. It has been verified that on 3 occasions during thunderstorms, he telephoned the electric company in a frantic vein and asked that desperate precautions against a lapse of power be taken. Now and then his entries shew concern over the failure of the reporters to find the metal box and stone, and the strangely marred old skeleton when they explored the shadowy tower room. He assumed that these things had been removed. Whither, and by whom, or what, he could only guess. But his worst fears concerned himself, and the kind of unholy rapport he felt to exist between his mind and that lurking horror in the distant steeple, that monstrous thing of night which his rashness had called out of the ultimate black spaces. He seemed to feel a constant tugging at his walls. He seemed to feel a constant tugging at his will, and callers of that period remember how he would sit abstractedly at his desk and stare out of the west window at that far-off, spire-bristling mound beyond the swirling smoke of the city. His entries dwell monotonously on certain terrible dreams, and of a strengthening of the unholy rapport in his sleep. There is mention of a night when he awaked to find himself fully dressed, outdoors, and headed automatically down College Hill toward the west. Again and again he dwells on the fact that the thing in the steeple knows where to find him. And he's back at the door. I opened my door to let one cat out, and then, immediately, another cat enters. They just did a swap. As I was about to close the door on that new cat, though, as she realized that she did not want to be locked in, so I have evaded both cats. 2 out of 3 cats evaded. Okay, changing position. Maybe this will be better now that I don't have to entertain any more felines. Oh, no swap cats. No swap cats. She is even worse than he is. She's far too clumsy. She would be up here and she would be rubbing on the microphone as well, and she would also be literally falling off the desk. I don't know if I could keep her in one space for very long. But she would not be nearly as loud about it, I suppose, at least not in the crying way, just in the crashing way. Oh, this is very timely. The week following July 30th is recalled as the time of Blake's partial breakdown. He did not dress and ordered all his food by telephone. Visitors remarked the cords he kept near his bed, and he said that sleepwalking had forced him to bind his ankles every night with knots, which would probably hold or else waken him with the labor of untying. Redeemed to swap cats. Actually probably wouldn't be so bad. Redeemed to pop a cat up, maybe. I can't guarantee a swap usually though, depending on the time. It's a very large house, so I sometimes don't see them for good hours at a time, and other times they're just, well, how to put it? I've already said this before. There's a thing that doesn't like a door that wants it down. It might be a cat, but it's not a cat exactly. It's just yesterday. So many cats. So many cats. No more than 3. 3 is the absolute limit. No more than 3. In his diary, he told of the hideous experience which had brought the collapse. After retiring on the night of the 30th, he had suddenly found himself groping about in an almost black space. All he could see were the short, faint, horizontal streaks of bluish light. But he could smell an overpowering fetor and hear a curious jumble of soft, furtive sounds above him. Whenever he moved, he stumbled over something, and at each noise there would come a sort of answering sound from above, a vague stirring mixed with the cautious sliding of wood on wood. Once his groping hands encountered a pillar of stone with a vacant top, whilst later he found himself clutching the rungs of a ladder built into the wall, and fumbling his uncertain way upward towards some region of intenser stench where a hot, searing blast beat down against him. Before his eyes, a kaleidoscopic range of phantasmal images played, and all of them dissolving at intervals into the picture of a vast, unplumbed abyss of night, wherein whirled suns and worlds of an even profounder blackness. He thought of the ancient legends of ultimate chaos, at whose center sprawls the blind idiot god Azathoth, lord of all things, encircled by his flopping horde of mindless and amorphous dancers, and lulled by the thin, monotonous piping of a demonic flute held in nameless paws. And send no more, please. Yes, actually, yeah, no more cats. Don't send me any more cats. I've already acquired 2 just by being, sent them. No more, no more, no more. Only one of these cats that I currently have is a cat that I, picked out and adopted purposefully. She was so much cheaper that way. Then a sharp report from the outer world broke through his stupor and roused him to the unutterable horror of his position. What it was, he never knew. Perhaps it was some belated appeal from the fireworks heard all summer on Federal Hill as the dwellers hail their various patron saints, or the saints of their native villages in Italy. In any event, he shrieked aloud, dropping frantically from the ladder, and stumbled blindly across the obstructed floor of the almost lightless chamber that encompassed him. He knew instantly where he was, and plunged recklessly down the narrow spiral staircase, tripping and bruising himself at every turn. There was a nightmare flight through a vast cobwebbed wave whose ghostly arches reached up to the realms of leering shadow, a sightless scramble through a littered basement, a climb to regions of air and streetlights outside, and a mad racing down a spectral hill of gibbering gables, across a grim, silent city of tall black towers, and up the steep eastward precipice to his own ancient door. I could commission someone to draw my cats for this purpose. I have commissioned someone to draw my cats in the past. One for a comic book. If you've ever heard of Action Cats, I got the artist of that to draw my cats at the time on one of the blank covers. And I commissioned another piece of one of my old cats as a old catnip smoking wizard. I always wanted to go back to her and ask for my other 2 cats done that way as well. But yeah, I could probably do a pick crew at least for now of the cats. One of them should be very simple. She's flat gray. The other one would be more of a terror. both in art and also in real life. I'll have to consider that. I can probably show the other piece I had done, My Cat as a Wizard, at some piece. I wonder if she's still doing those commissions. It was a number of years ago. Whoop! Oh, that was really loud. I'm sorry. Thank you for the subscription, Custom Elvis. I'm sorry that was so loud. Can you hear it, actually? I didn't see it pop up, so I'm wondering, like, I do have Streamlab alerts on. It should be working. Unless I didn't do something right in the back end. Mm, mm. I think I will try and dig up the post of my cat later and post it on Twitter. Or maybe at the end of this, because we have how many more pages? Oh, we only have like 2 more pages. Maybe I'll grab it if I can find it. Let's see. Maybe she has a picture of it online somewhere. On regaining consciousness in the morning, he found himself lying on his study floor fully dressed. Dirt and cobwebs covered him, and every inch of his body seemed sore and bruised. When he faced the mirror, he saw that his hair was badly scorched, while a trace of strange, evil odor seemed to cling to his upper outer clothing. It was then that his nerves broke down. Thereafter, lounging exhaustedly about in a dressing gown, he did little but stare from his west window, shiver at the threat of thunder, and make wild entries into his diary. The great storm broke just before midnight on August 8th. Lightning struck repeatedly in all parts of the city, and 2 remarkable fireballs were reported. The rain was torrential, and while a constant fusillade of thunder brought sleeplessness to thousands, Blake was utterly frantic in his fear of the lightning system and tried to telephone the company around 1 a.m., though by that time service had been temporarily cut off in the interest of safety. He recorded everything in his diary, the large, nervous, and often undecipherable hieroglyphs telling their own story of growing frenzy and despair, and of entries scrawled blindly in the dark. He had to keep the house dark in order to see out the window, and it appears that most of his time was spent at his desk, peering anxiously through the rain across glistening miles of downtown roofs at the constellation of distant lights marking Federal Hill. Now and then he would fumblingly make an entry in his diary, so that detached phrases such as, "The lights must not go," "It knows where I am," "I must destroy it," and "It is calling to me, but perhaps it means no injury this time," are found scattered down 2 of the pages. My ears are big and sensitive, please understand. Yeah, they are kind of big. I mean, it's not. Compared to humans, they're big. Compared to humans, they're big. Mm-hmm. Then the lights went out all over the city. It happened at 2:12 a.m., according to the powerhouse records, but Blake's diary gives no indication of the time. The entry is merely, "Lights out. God help me." On Federal Hill, there were watchers as anxious as he, and rain-soaked knots of men paraded the square and alleys around the evil church with umbrella-shaded candles, electric flashlights, oil lanterns, crucifixes, and obscure charms of the many sorts common in southern Italy. They blessed each flash of lightning and made cryptical signs of fear with their right hands when the turn in the storm caused the flashes to lessen and finally to cease altogether. A rising wind blew out most of the candles, so that the scene grew threateningly dark. Someone roused Father Marzullo of Spirito Santo Church, and he hastened to the dismal square to pronounce whatever helpful syllables he could. Of the restless and curious sounds in the blackened tower, there could be no doubt whatsoever. It's not. Mm, no words. No words. Just thinking, though, I do enjoy ASMR in general, but I really do enjoy the ear noises. It's kind of a, I wonder why. I wonder why. Mm-hmm. I know it's not for everyone. I feel like I know a lot more people who don't like it than like it. For what happens at 2:35, we have the testimony of the priest, a young, intelligent, and well-educated person, of Patrolman William J. Monahan of the Central Station, an officer of the highest reliability who had paused at that part of his beat to inspect the crowd, and most of the 78 men who had gathered around the church's high bank wall, especially those in the square where the eastward facade was visible. Of course, there was nothing which can be proved as being outside the order of nature. The possible causes of such an event are many. No one can speak with certainty of the obscure chemical processes arising in vast, ancient, ill-aired, and long-deserted building of heterogeneous contents. Mephitic vapors, spontaneous combustion, pressure of gases born of long decay. Any one of numerous phenomena might be responsible. And then, of course, the factor of conscious charlatanry can by no means be excluded. The thing was really quite simple in itself, and covered less than 3 minutes of actual time. Father Marzullo, always a precise man, looked at his watch repeatedly. Thank you, Blitz LaFarouche, for the follow. Thank you. Let's see. It started with a definite swelling of the dull fumbling sounds inside the black tower. There had been for some time a vague exhalation of strange, evil odors from the church, and this had now become emphatic and offensive. Then at last there was a sound of splintering wood, and a large, heavy object crashed down in the yard beneath the frowning easterly facade. The tower was invisible now that the candles would not burn out. Or now that the candles would not burn. But as the object neared the ground, the people knew that it was the smoke-grimed louver boarding of the tower's east window. Immediately afterwards, an utterly unbearable fear wailed forth from the unseen heights, choking and sickening the trembling watchers, and almost prostrating those in the square. At the same time, the air trembled with a vibration as of flapping wings, and a sudden east-blowing wind, more violent than any previous blast, snatched off the hats and wrenched the dripping umbrellas of the crowd. Nothing definite could be seen in the candleless night, though some upward-looking spectators thought they glimpsed a great spreading blur of denser blackness against the inky sky, something like a formless cloud of smoke that shot with meteor-like speed toward the east. That was all. The watchers were half-numbed with fright, awe, and discomfort, and scarcely knew what to do, or whether to do anything at all. Not knowing what had happened, they did not relax their vigil, and a moment later they sent up a prayer as a sharp flash of belated lightning, followed by an ear-splitting crash of sound rent from the flooded heavens. Half an hour later, the rain stopped, and in 15 minutes more, the streetlights sprang on again, sending the weary, bedraggled watchers relievedly back to their homes. Next day's papers gave these matters minor mention in connection with the general storm reports. It seems the great lightning flash and deafening explosion which followed the Federal Hill occurrence were even more tremendous farther east, where a burst of the singular fetor was likewise noticed. The phenomenon was most marked over College Hill, where the crash awaked all the sleeping inhabitants and led to a bewildered round of speculations. Of those who were already awake, only a few saw the anomalous blaze of light near the top of the hill, or noticed the inexplicable upward rush of air which almost stripped the leaves from the trees and blasted the plants in the gardens. Not the gardens, no, sorry. That would be just thinking, like, what if that happened to my garden? Oh, I would cry. I would cry. It was agreed that the lone sudden lightning bolt must have struck somewhere in the neighborhood, though no trace of its striking afterward could be found. A youth in the Tau Omega fraternity house thought he saw a grotesque and hideous mass of smoke in the air just as the preliminary flash burst, but his observation has not been verified. All the few observers, however, agree as to the violent gust of the west and the flood of intolerable stench which preceded the belated stroke, whilst evidence concerning the momentary burned odor after the stroke is equally general. Thank you for the water. Did it not water? Did I turn it off? Did I move it too much? I may have moved it too much. It's the water. Wait. Okay. There's my water. Okay. I have to reach all the way over there with the water. It should be connected. It should be connected. Maybe I broke the connection somehow. Let's see. Okay. Sigh. Equally general. These points were discussed very carefully because of their probable connection with the death of Robert Blake. Students in the Psi Delta house, whose upper rear windows looked into Blake's study, noticed the blurred white face at the westward window on the morning of the 9th and wondered what was wrong with the expression. When they saw the same face in the same position that evening, they felt worried and watched for the lights to come up in his apartment. Later, they rang the bell of the darkened flat and finally had a policeman force the door. The rigid body sat bolt upright at the desk by the window, and when the intruder saw the glassy, bulging eyes and the marks of stark, convulsive fright on the twisted features, they turned away in sickened dismay. Shortly afterwards, the coroner's physician made an examination, and despite the unbroken window, reported electrical shock, or nervous tension induced by the electrical discharge, as the cause of death. The hideous expression he ignored altogether, deeming it not an improbable result of the profound shock, as experienced by a person of such abnormal imagination and unbalanced emotions. He deduced that the latter qualities from books, paintings, and manuscripts found in the apartment, and from the blindly scrawled entries in the diary on the desk. Blake had prolonged his frenzied jottings to the last, and the broken pointed pencil was found clutched in his spasmodically constricted right hand. The entries after the failure of the lights were highly disjointed and legible only in part. From them, certain investigators had drawn conclusions differing greatly from the materialistic official verdict, but such speculations have little chance for belief among the conservative. The case of these imaginative theorists have not been helped by the action of superstitious Dr. Dexter, who threw the curious box in angled stone, an object certainly self-luminous as seen in the black windowless steeple where it was found, into the deepest channel of Narragansett Bay? These New England names. Narragansett Bay. Excessive imagination and neurotic unbalance on Blake's part, aggravated by knowledge of the evil bygone cult whose startling traces he had uncovered, formed the dominant interpretation given these final frenzied jottings. These are the entries, or all that can be made of them. Okay, other. Light's still out. Must be 5 minutes now. Everything depends on lightning. Yadith grant it will keep up. Some influence seems beating through it. Rain and thunder and wind deafen. The thing is taking hold of my mind. Trouble with memory. I see things I never knew before. Other worlds and other galaxies. Dark. The lightning seems dark, and the darkness seems light. It cannot be the real hill and church that I see in pitch darkness. It must be retinal impressions left by flashes. Heaven grant the Italians are out with their candles if the lightning stops. What am I afraid of? It is not an avatar of Neuralthotep, whose antique and shadowy chem even took the form of man. I remember Yugoth, the more distant Shagai, the ultimate void of the black planets. The long winging flight through the void cannot cross the universe of light, recreated by the thoughts caught in the shining trapezohedron. Send it through the horrible abysses of radiance. My name is Blake, Robert Harrison Blake of 620 East Knapp Street, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I am on this planet. Azathoth, have mercy. The lightning no longer flashes. Horrible. I can see everything with a monstrous sense that is not sight. Light is dark, and dark is light. Those people on the hill. Guard. Candles and charms. They're priests. Sense of distance gone. Far is near and near is far. No light, no glass. See that steeple, that tower, window. Can hear. Roderick Usher. Am mad or going mad. The thing is stirring and fumbling in the tower. I am it, and it is I. I want to get out. Must get out and unify the forces. It knows where I am. I am Robert Blake, but I see the tower in the dark. There is a monstrous odor, senses transfigured, boarding at that tower window, cracking and giving way. Yeah, okay. Yeek. I see it, coming here. Hellwind, Titan Blur, Black Wings, Yog Sothoth. Yog Sothoth, save me. The three-lobed burning eye. That is the end of the Haunter of the Dark. I want to say, in hindsight, like, good at description, but I feel like maybe the pacing has just changed throughout the years. Or rather, the interest in pacing. Okay. I'm going to take another quick drink. I don't think I have any other short stories I want to cover tonight. Actually, no, that's a lie. There might be one more. Let me check real quick. It will be a really, really, really short story, though. Really, really short. Oh, I want to say that may or may not work. Just thinking, you have to be very careful about you're doing your replacements there. So then you have to replace. You probably want to replace I with like I2, and then it's you know how that goes. I'm trying to remember. Just you have to be careful about the order of that. Otherwise, you end up with everything being one word, and then you do the replacement, and then you still only have one word, unless you're doing it manually. But why would you do it manually? We can just search all and replace all. You have something that's capable of doing that, right? Let's see. Where's that story? Um, mm, where is that story? Wasn't it? Wasn't it? I don't have the physical book, so I'm looking somewhere else. This isn't the right book at all. Okay, I have to switch it out. This isn't a book related thing, but I only bring it up because it's something new, and I think it's kind of a big deal for the people who play Fate Grand Order or are interested in Fate in general. But there is what's the phrase? There is a new summer event, and the reason I speak of this is because I'm looking up someone who's important in the current summer event. Hmm. Maybe it's because I can't spell. It's probably because I can't spell. Yeah, it's because I can't spell. I could not spell that name. So yeah, there's two new characters who just dropped for the Fate Grand Order, and one of them is it is, but it isn't, the absolutely faded Arcweed, right? Arcweed? So it's kind of they mm, they must be desperate to keep people, I suppose, or they just decided it's been long enough. It's been 7 years. Maybe that's a lucky number. Evil fate. I want to say I actually the event probably ends tonight. I haven't started it. I'm not going to spend money. I'm not going to spend money, but I do kind of want the summer outfit. I know I can't finish the story in time. I'll just watch it or I'll play it next year, but I don't think I can get the outfit next year. The summer, what's the phrase? Like the camp outfit looks really cute. Okay, so a while ago I read one of the Hans Christian Andersen short fairy tales. I read The Real Princess because I was talking about my cat, the um the outside one. Uh her name is Contessa, which is countess in a few different languages. And her first time indoors, she peed on the bed that she was in. So I read The Princess and the Pea, pretty much, if you know that story. So I think I'm going to grab a different short story from the Hans Christian Andersen book. All right. Also, hello, mommy, enjoyer. I didn't see you in there. I mean, I saw you, but I just saw the troll face as the very first thing in here. Okay. How about the shadow? We just read about the haunter of the dark. Let's read the shadow. How long is the shadow? Oh, the shadow is actually quite long. Man, I guess it isn't super long in the grand scheme of things. Maybe it's just because. Oh, it's actually quite short, I guess, in comparison. It's just. What's the phrase? Actually, a little long. I have it a little bigger for distance. So it's easier to read from a distance because of the angle I'm at. Also, I haven't read The Shadow before, so let's take a look. Let's take a look at what The Shadow is about. It's like there's a lot of stories in here that have people might be familiar with because it's Hans Christian Andersen. For instance, there is the Snow Queen story, right? And that is probably the basis for what Frozen, right? And then there's the Little Match Girl, which I think is a popular one, like Christmassy time. And The Princess and the Pea, like the real princess, that has come about quite a bit, or at least it used to in like children's tales. And then there's The Emperor's New Clothes as well, which again was adapted by Disney in a really backwards way, I suppose. Backwards is not quite the right word for it either. Uh, they took the very, very basic concept and then they kind of threw half of that basic concept out and made a comedy of what was left. But the rest of these I haven't actually read a whole lot about, or at least I don't know them by these names. I was not read Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale books when I was a child. I feel like some of the books I read was some of them have definitely gotten replaced in age. Some of the contents of them they've been edited. One of them was what was it? Folk of the Faraway Tree, and I distinctly remember there being a land of Slap with Dame Slap as its head, and I don't think they. I don't think that they suggest hitting your child anymore when they do bad. I think they swapped out that land for something else. And I guess there was also a name connotation that they changed to. I think there's a character whose name is Fanny, and that has taken on a. I don't think it's a common name anymore for slang reasons. Granted, a child would not know. Okay, so I'm actually going to put up ending soon, but I'm also going to be reading The Shadow as the last one. So let me just grab up the note. To go to the studio mode quick. Don't know where I put the text. Where go? Should be fine. should be fine. Okay. Real quick. Stay quick. It's not gonna be quick. It still looks a little bit long, but not horrible. Uh, not nearly as long as the Haunter in the Dark. Can't believe nobody uses that name anymore. Which name? Remove the shadow. Something else. It is in the hot lands that the sun burns. Sure enough, there the people become quite mahogany brown. Aye, and in the hottest. Oh, okay. I can see why this story was not. Never mind. I'm not going to read that story. Let's see. False collar? I should have read more than like literally 2 sentences in. I just thought, oh, the shadow. That would be a good comparison to the Haunter of the Dark. Let's see. The red shoes. The red shoes. I'll try that one instead. We'll take a quick look. Oh, the slang one. Yeah. Maybe I understand now. Like, because I haven't read these necessarily before. Like, why do people not reference these stories anymore? And it's kind of an because they're a little rough, perhaps? They're a little rough. They're way rough. And dated. And I can't believe I read, like, I won't say the best one, but, like, the good one. Okay, what about this one? This one seems actually a little, I say a little long. I've been saying they're all a little long. This one's about something that's also bad. Let's find out. Okay. I'm picking a different, not book, different story. The Elder Bush. Actually, no, the old house. The old house. We'll read about the old house. That I think also feels like it fits well with the Haunter of the Dark. And also with the Yellow Wallpaper. Okay, Hans Christian Andersen, The Old House. In the street up there was a very old house. It was almost 300 years old, for that might be known by reading the great beam on which the date of the year was carved. Together with tulips and hop vines, there were whole verses spelled as in former times, and over every window was a distorted face cut out in the beam. The one story stood forward a great way over the other, and directly under the eaves was a leaden spout with a dragon's head. The rainwater should have run out of the mouth, but it ran out of the belly, for there was a hole in the spout. You just looked at it too? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's why I was also very careful about picking which Lovecraft book or which Lovecraft story. Like, yeah, this one definitely not gonna fly. Not that one. Hans Christian Andersen. Oh, Hans Christian Andersen. Lovecraft. He was such a. Well, he died penniless and afraid. So afraid. What story is this? It's The Old House. It is The Old House. All the other houses in the street were so new and so neat, with large window panes and smooth walls. One could easily see that they would have nothing to do with the old house. They certainly thought, how long is that old decayed thing to stand there as a spectacle in the street? And then the projecting windows stand so far out that no one can see from our windows what happens in that direction. The steps are as broad as those of a palace, and as high as to a church tower. Your iron railings look just like the door to an old family vault, and then they have brass tops. That's so stupid. On the other side of the street were also new and neat houses, and they thought just as the others did. But at the window opposite the old house, there sat a little boy with fresh, rosy cheeks and bright, beaming eyes. He certainly liked the old house best, and that both in sunshine and moonshine. And when he looked across the wall where the mortar had fallen out, he could sit and find out that there were strange figures imaginable, exactly as the street had appeared before, with steps, projecting windows, and pointed gables. He could see soldiers with halberds and spouts where the water ran, like dragons and serpents. That was a house to look at, and there lived an old man who wore plush breeches, and he had a coat with large brass buttons, and a wig that one could see was a real wig. Every morning there came an old fellow to him who put his rooms in order and went on errands. Otherwise, the old man in the plush breeches was quite alone in the old house. Now and then he came to the window and looked out, and the little boy nodded to him, and the old man nodded again, and so they became acquaintances, and then they were friends, although they had never spoken to each other. But that made no difference. The little boy heard his parents say, "The old man opposite is very well off, but he is so very, very lonely." The Sunday following, the little boy took something and wrapped it up in a piece of paper, went downstairs and stood in the doorway. And when the man who went on errands came past, he said to him, "I say, master, will you give this to the old man over the way from me? I have 2 pewter soldiers. This is one of them, and he shall have it, for I know he is so very, very lonely." And the old errand man looked quite pleased, nodded, and took the pewter soldier over to the old house. Afterwards there came a message. It was to ask if the little boy himself had not a wish to come over and pay a visit, and so he got permission from his parents, and then went over to the old house. And the brass balls on the iron railing shone much brighter than ever. One would have thought they were polished on account of the visit, and it was as if the carved-out trumpeters, for there were trumpeters who stood in tulips carved out on the door, blew with all their might. Their cheeks appeared so much rounder than before. Yes, they blew. Tra-cha-ra-tra, the little boy comes. Tra-cha-ra-cha, and then the door is opened. The whole passage was hung with portraits of knights in armor and ladies in silken gowns, and their armor rattled, and the silken gowns rustled. And then there was a flight of stairs which went a good way upwards, and a little way downwards, and then one came on a balcony which was in a very dilapidated state. Sure enough, with large holes and long crevices, but grass grew there, and leaves out of them altogether. For the whole balcony outside, the yards and the walls, were overgrown with so much green stuff, it looked like a garden. Only a balcony. Here stood old flower pots with faces and asses' ears, and the flowers grew just as they liked. One of the pots was quite overrun on all sides with pinks, that is to say, with the green part. Shoot stood by shoot, and it is said quite distinctly, "The air has cherished me, the sun has kissed me, and promised me a little flower on Sunday, a little flower on Sunday." And then they entered a chamber where the halls were covered with hog's leather and printed with gold flowers. "The gilding decays, but hog's leather stays," said the walls. And there stood easy chairs, with such high backs and so carved out, and with arms on both sides. Sit down, said they. Ugh, how I creak. Now I shall certainly get the gout, like the old clothes press. Ugh. And then the little boy came into the room where the projecting windows were, and where the old man sat. "I thank you for the pewter soldier, my little friend," said the old man, "and I thank you because you came over to me." Thank ye, or cranky, cranky, sounded from all the furniture. There was so much of it that each article stood in the other's way to get a look at the little boy. In the middle of the wall hung a picture representing a beautiful lady, so young, so glad, but dressed quite as in former times, with cloth that stood quite stiff, and with powder in her hair. She neither said thank ye, nor cranky, cranky, but looked with her mild eyes at the little boy, who directly asked the old man, "Where did you get her?" Yonder at the broker's, said the old man, where there are so many pictures hanging. No one knows or cares about them, for they are all of them buried. But I knew her in bygone days, and now she has been dead and gone these 50 years. Under the picture, in a glazed frame, there hung a bouquet of withered flowers. They were almost 50 years old. They looked so very old. The pendulum of the great clock went to and fro, and the hands turned, and everything in the room became still older, but they did not observe it. They say at home, said the little boy, that you are so very, very lonely. Oh, said he. Thank you for the follow. The old thoughts, with what they might bring in them, come and visit me, and now you also come. I am very well off. Then he took a book with pictures in it down from the shelf. There were whole long processions and pageants, with the strangest characters, which one never sees nowadays. Soldiers like the knave of clubs, and citizens with waving flags. The tailors had theirs, with a pair of shears held by 2 lions, and the shoemakers theirs, without boots, but with an eagle that had 2 heads, for the shoemakers must have everything so that they can say, "It is a pair." Yes, that was a picture book. The old man now went into the other room to fetch preserves, apples, and nuts. Yes, it was delightful over there in the old house. I cannot bear it any longer, said the pewter soldier, who sat in the drawers. It is so lonely and melancholy here. But when one has been in a family circle, one cannot accustom oneself to this life. I cannot bear it any longer. The whole day is so long, and the evenings are still longer. Here it is not at all as it was over the way at your home, where your father and mother spoke so pleasantly, and where you and all your sweet children made such a delightful noise. Nay, how lonely the old man is. Do you think he gets kisses? Do you think he gets mild eyes or a Christmas tree? He will get nothing but a grave. I can bear it no longer. You must not let it grieve you so much, said the little boy. I find it so very delightful here. And then, as all the old thoughts, with what they may bring with them, they come and visit here. Yes, it's all very well, but I see nothing of them, and I don't know them, said the pewter soldier. I cannot bear it. But you must, said the little boy. Then in came the old man with the most pleased and happy face, the most delicious preserves, apples, and nuts, and so the little boy thought no more about the pewter soldier. The little boy returned home happy and pleased, and weeks and days passed away, and nods were made to the old house, and from the old house, and then the little boy went over there again. The carved trumpeters blew. Tra-tra-ra-tra, there is the little boy. Tra-tra-ra-tra. And the swords and armors on the knights' portraits rattled, and the silk gowns rustled. The hog's leather spoke, and the old chairs had the gout in their legs and rheumatism in their backs. Ugh, it was exactly like the first time, for over there one day and an hour was just like another. I cannot bear it, said the pewter soldier. I have shed pewter tears. It is too melancholy. Rather let me go to the wars and lose arms and legs. It would at least be a change. I cannot bear it longer. Now I know what it is to have a visit from one's old thoughts, with what they may bring with them. I have had a visit from mine, and you may be sure it is no pleasant thing in the end. I was at last about to jump down from the drawers. I saw you all over there at home so distinctly, as if you were really here. It was again that Sunday morning. All you children stood before the table and sung your psalms, as you do every morning. You stood devoutly with folded hands, and father and mother were just as pious. And then the door was opened, and little sister Mary, who is not 2 years old yet, and who always dances when she hears music or singing, of whatever kind it may be, was put into the room, though she ought not to have been there. And then she began to dance, but could not keep time, because the tones were so long. And then she stood, first on one leg, and bent her head forwards, and then on the other leg, and bent her head forwards. But all would not do. You stood so seriously altogether, although it was difficult enough. But I laughed to myself, and then I fell off the table and got a bump, which I have still, for it was not right of me to laugh. But the whole now passes before me again in thought, and everything that I have lived to see. and these are the old thoughts, with what they may bring with them. Tell me if you still sing on Sundays. Tell me something about little Mary, and how my comrade, the other pewter soldier, lives. Yes, he is happy enough, that's sure. I cannot bear it any longer. You are given away as a present, said the little boy. You must remain. Can you not understand that? The old man now came with a drawer, in which there was much to be seen, both tin boxes and balsam boxes, old cards, so large and so gilded, such as one never sees them now. And several drawers were opened, and the piano was opened. It had landscapes on the inside of the lid, and it was so hoarse when the old man played on it. And then he hummed a song. Yes, she could sing that, said he, and nodded to the portrait, which he had bought at the broker's, and the old man's eyes shone so bright. I will go to the wars, I will go to the wars, shouted the pewter soldier as loud as he could, and threw himself off the drawers right down on the floor. What became of him? The old man sought, and the little boy sought. He was away, and he stayed away. I shall find him, said the old man, but he never found him. The floor was too open. The pewter soldier had fallen through a crevice, and there he lay as in an open tomb. That day passed, and the little boy went home, and that week passed, and several weeks too. The windows were quite frozen. The little boy was obliged to sit and breathe on them to get a peephole over the old house, and there the snow had been blown into the carved work and inscriptions. It lay quite up over the steps, just as if there was no one at home. Nor was there any one at home. The old man was dead. In the evening there was a hearse seen before the door, and he was borne into it in his coffin. He was now to go out into the country to lie in his grave. He was driven out there, but no one followed. All his friends were dead, and the little boy kissed his hand to the coffin as it was driven away. Some days afterwards there was an auction at the old house, and the little boy saw from his window how they carried the old knights and the old ladies away, the flower pots with the long ears, the old chairs, and the old clothes presses. Something came here, and something came there. The portrait of her who had been found to the brokers came to the brokers again, and there it hung, for no one knew her more. No one cared about the old picture. In the spring they pulled the old house down, for, as people said, it was a ruin. One could see from the street right into the room with the hog's leather hanging, which was slashed and torn, and the green grass and leaves above the balcony hung quite wild about the falling beams. And then it was put to rights. That was a relief, said the neighboring houses. A fine house was built there, with large windows and smooth white walls. But before it, where the old house had in fact stood, a little garden laid out. A wild grapevine ran up the wall of the neighboring house. Before the garden there was a large iron railing with an iron door, and it looked quite splendid, and people stood still and peeped in, and the sparrows hung by scores in the vine, and chattered away at each other as well as they could, but it was not about the old house, for they could not remember it, so many years had passed, so many that the little boy had grown up to become a whole man, yes, a clever man and a pleasure to his parents. And he had just been married, and, together with his little wife, had come to live in the house here, where the garden was, and he stood by her there while she planted a flower field she found so pretty. She planted it with her little hand, and pressed the earth around it with her fingers. Oh, what was that? She had stuck herself. There sat something pointed, straight out of the soft mold. It was, yes, it was the pewter soldier, he that was lost up at the old man's, and had tumbled and turned amongst the timber and the rubbish, and had at last, for many years, laid in the ground. The young wife wiped the dirt off the soldier, first with a green leaf, then her with her fine handkerchief. It had such a delightful smell that it was to the pewter soldier just as if he had been awakened from a trance. Let me see him, said the young man. He laughed and then shook his head. Nay, it cannot be he, but he reminds me of a story about a pewter soldier which I had when I was a little boy. And then he told his wife about the old house, and the old man, and about the pewter soldier that he had sent over to him because he was so very, very lonely. And then he told it correctly as it had really been, so that the tears came into the eyes of his young wife, on account of the old house and the old man. It may possibly be, however, that it is the same pewter soldier, said she. I will take care of it, and remember all that you have told me, but you must show me the old man's grave. But I do not know it, said he, and no one knows it. All his friends were dead, no one took care of it, and I was then a little boy. How very, very lonely he must have been, said she. Very, very lonely, said the pewter soldier. But it is delightful to not be forgotten. Delightful shouted something close by, but no one except the pewter soldier saw that it was a piece of the hog's leather hangings, for it had lost all its gilding. It looked like a piece of wet clay, but it had an opinion, and it gave it. The gilding decays, but hog's leather stays. This the pewter soldier did not believe. His little wife, yes. This is the end of The Old House. So that is the particular way that Hans Christian Andersen tends to write his characters, I suppose, like his descriptions, because I'm pretty certain there was something a little similar like that in The Real Princess. Let's see. I suppose it's also a question of, I don't know this. Did he write in English as the first language, or is everything translated? Because that might be a better question as to the word choices. Let me just check real quick. I feel a little bad that I don't know off the top of my head. Okay, he's a Danish author, so I'm going to guess everything is translated. So part of this might just be an issue of translation. Mm-hmm. Yes, I would imagine it's going to all be translation issues. Issues is probably not the right word. Uh, hmm. Translation choices. That is the question. I have read 3 little stories. One, well, first one I guess was short-ish. Second one was a bit longer, and this one was probably the shortest. I think I'm going to call it at that for tonight. Okay, let me just think. What do I have planned for the upcoming week? The upcoming week is going to be. Actually, maybe I should switch over. Yeah, I'm going to switch. Actually, no, I'm not going to switch. I'm going to. Actually, do this without it looking strange. No, I can't. Real quick, be right back. Really, really, really quick. Okay, that wasn't what I was hoping for. Okay. Uh, so I'm going to have on Tuesday, I'm going to be playing a tabletop game of some sort. It will probably be Root because I picked up all the creature, learning how to play all the creatures except for the merchant, so I'll probably go through that. And Wednesday, I will be playing The Witcher 3, going through that. I stopped in the middle of a quest. I'm at the stage of the going after the giants, I suppose. I just discovered his larder, so to speak. And on Sunday again, I will probably be doing another reading like this, but maybe I will have something different to read then. I will have to go through the library. But if you have any suggestions for things for me to read, I would appreciate hearing it. You can DM me or tweet at me or even type it in chat here. I will catch it. Thank you very much, Elvis, as well, for listening. Let's see. What is going on? Who is here? Like, who is currently live? I am not super familiar necessarily at like who is doing ASMR right now. Let's see. I'm seeing someone who's making probably a mistake. Uh, do I do themed reading? Well, this is only actually the second time I've read. The first time was 4th of July. I read uh Summer Fireworks and My Corpse for 4th of July. Uh I think I would probably want to keep it in the vein of summer, but I'm not completely against other things as well. I mean, it's not like Haunter of the Dark is particularly summer themed, exactly, but it turned out to be fine. And Yellow Wallpaper, again, was not intentionally picked because of it being summer themed, it just happened to be set during summer. So I don't mind. And I think, oh, hello, Big Harry and Tarkus. When it comes to other things as well for reading, I don't think I would mind reading up to like 100 pages, maybe. Uh, because the longest one that I've read so far in one go has been 80 pages ish, and that was Summer Fireworks and My Corpse. The other ones, mm, I don't want to read anything like super, super, which is my problem here because I do have something that I wanted to read, but I thought was too long for Promise short story. It's much more of a novella at that stage, you know? Like, what's the definition of a short story versus a novella? And that was my error. Let's see. Is up. I also should probably be turning off. I'm gonna turn off this noise real quick to make sure I don't end up blasting weird audio. Let's find out. Let's find out. Who is currently anyone else currently doing any reading? I know some of you came from Thumologist who was reading through Lord of the Rings earlier. Let's see. Let's see. It's so slow. Everything's so slow. Okay, this actually. Oh, someone's doing a scary story time before bed. Oh, they're doing scary stories to read in the dark. I want to hear this. Okay. I actually really, really want to hear this. Let's find out. Let's find out. Okay. I have to be able to spell this name. Is this going to go?
Request begins.
Let's see. Oh, I also realized that I forgot what's the phrase. I keep meaning to switch the advertising in here. Like it should have been the ads at the beginning and not in the middle for ASMR streams. I need to remember to actually do that. I need like a little post-it note of things to do every time. But we are going to go over to Ethereal Ari because she is reading scary stories to read in the dark, and I think that will be a similar vibe to here. Thank you again very much for joining me. And again, I should be doing another one of these next Sunday, starting at 5 p.m. EDT. So hopefully everything will work out again. Thank you very much, and I will see you soon. Have a good night.